Chapter 880. The living room of the warmly and luxuriously decorated villa shone with all kinds of lights and shadows. The lights in the living room were dimmed. On the huge projection screen that almost occupied the entire wall, all kinds of pictures kept flickering. Yellow sand fluttered in the air. An explosion of raging flames. Domineering sword light. His Majesty sat on the sofa and watched these pictures. He had been silent for a long time. Jiang Guochu sat on the sofa on the other side with a solemn face. From time to time, he glanced in the direction of His Majesty with undisguised curiosity. On the screen was the picture of the Desert War. From beginning to end, it sounded like nothing, but in fact it was shocking enough. The Jiang family of South America naturally had its own information channels in Zhongzhou State. Not only the Jiang family of South America, but also Jifeng Sword Training School in East Island had its own pawns that had been operating for many years. But unsurprisingly, they couldn't get any video images about the Desert War at all. It was said that those who were qualified to pay attention to the Desert War could be regarded as leaders of Zhongzhou State. In terms of authority, they had reached the level of Zhongzhou State councillors. Under normal circumstances, it was impossible for countries and forces in the world to cultivate their pawns to such a level. But His Majesty could directly watch everything about the Desert War, including all the details. What did this mean? And this kind of watching was not the video that was obtained afterward. The picture on the screen was a little delayed, but there was no doubt that it was a real live broadcast. This also meant that His Majesty had at least one councillor's connections in Zhongzhou State, and he had enough influence to let this councillor bear all the risks for him. For the Jiang family of South America, this news was even more important than the shocking sword stroke in the video. "Your Majesty!" Moraid suddenly called out. In the middle of the sofa, His Majesty gave a faint and watched the sword stroke in the video over and over again. The Desert War was over. But he kept playing the picture of that moment, over and over again. "What should we do now?" Moraid's tone was a little hesitant. The operation of the alliance of several forces to infiltrate Beihai had reached the final stage. The final battle was imminent, and the whole dark world was waiting for the result. But now Li Tianlan left the desert directly. The minister of the army headquarters personally took him back to Yuzhou. This attitude could not be more obvious. What was worse was that Li Tianlan might have stood by and watched the game between Zhongzhou State and Beihai. But after the blockade, Li Tianlan and Beihai would definitely join hands. Whether it was the termination plan, the blockade action, or the large number of elites of the Nightmare Troop who died in the desert, Li Tianlan and Qin Fangqing were destined to be irreconcilable enemies. This kind of personal grudge was magnified countless times at the most critical moment. Not to mention how Li Tianlan would retaliate against Qin Fangqing. At least now the more Qin Fangqing wanted to do something, the less likely Li Tianlan would let him do it. The 100,000-strong army moved majestically, but the blockade did not last more than 2 days. They expected the blockade to last at least half a month. The time difference meant too many things. Moraid didn't know whether to say that the Beijiang military region was incompetent, or that Emperor Dong's palace was too strong. In short, the result was there. Emperor Dong's palace, which had suffered heavy losses, had found its real core. In the next decisive battle in North Sea, they would also face Li Tianlan, and even face that sword. Moraid couldn't block that sword. He didn't want to find any reason or excuse, and there was no need. He really couldn't block it. He was now only half a step away from the peak of the invincible realm. Even if he could take this half a step in this period of time, and become a real expert at the peak of the invincible realm, he still couldn't block that sword. Even if he had the Pope's coronation, even if he was really at the peak of the invincible realm, Gu Qianchuan's death was still vivid in his mind. Moraid could be sure that at that moment, no matter if it was Gu Qianchuan or other experts at the peak of the invincible realm, as long as they stood in that position and faced that sword light, there would be no possibility of survival. "Are you afraid?" His Majesty lowered his head, looked at the sword light shuttling in the screen, and chuckled. The video had been played in slow motion, but the sword light on the screen was still like wind and lightning, insufferably arrogant. "I can't block this sword strike," Moraid said seriously. He was talking about the sword strike on the screen. The power of this sword strike was not as good as the eternal sword strike that injured the Chosen One in Eastern Europe. It was also not as good as the sword strike that the unidentified Chosen One made against Mount Dibbing about a year ago. But in terms of scene, this sword strike could be said to be the most gorgeous. This sword flew thousands of miles, rushed through mountains, rivers, and seas, tore up the ambitious team, the steel torrent, and tens of thousands of troops. After its power continued to weaken, it still killed Gu Qianchuan, who was holding a murderous weapon, in a flash. It could still kill someone at the peak of the invincible realm. Moraid couldn't block this sword strike from a distance. If it was a sword strike at a close distance, he couldn't block it. If you can't block it, then you can't block it. You don't need to block it. His Majesty's voice was gentle. And the state of this sword is a bit special. It can be regarded as a murderous weapon. Its power will only get weaker and weaker. It is not as terrible as you think. At this stage, in my opinion, Li Tianlan is the most terrible. Moraid wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. His Majesty seemed to know what he wanted to ask. He glanced at him and said quietly, "The final battle will continue. If this sword strike really appears on the battlefield, I will deal with it." His tone was flat and casual. Thinking of His Majesty's strange domain, Moraid calmed down slightly. His Majesty's finger gently slid across the screen, and the sword strike was played back again, tearing apart heaven and earth, moving forward with indomitable will. His Majesty's eyes were fixed on the sword light. The curve of his mouth was still there, but his eyes were full of disgust. Little by little, the pain that seemed to come from the depths of his memory gradually spread all over his body. His body trembled subconsciously, as if there were countless sword energy penetrating his body. The vague clouds and starlight shrouded him. He closed his eyes, smiled a little ferociously, and murmured, "Wuqing, it's been a long time." The sword light was reflected in the eyes of many people. His Majesty watched it again. Wang Shengxiao was also watching it. For anyone who aspired to the end of martial arts, that sword light could be regarded as the most beautiful scenery in the world. His Majesty's eyes were full of disgust, but Wang Shengxiao's eyes were full of appreciation. That kind of look was not surprise or shock, but pure appreciation. It was undisguised, unreserved, and with a little excitement. Phoenix sat next to him, and could clearly see the emotions in her nephew's eyes. To be exact, it was as if he was looking at something that belonged to him and expressing his joy. "You want that sword?" Phoenix said slowly. It was not a question. It was a statement without any emotional ups and downs. "That was my sword in the first place." Wang Shengxiao turned to look at her and said with a soft smile, "Or it is the sword of the Wang family of Beihai, the invincible sword in the world, strong beyond imagination." When did the sword of the Wang family of Beihai recognize an outsider as its master? Phoenix's voice was a little sarcastic. Wang Shengxiao didn't care. He seemed to have adapted to this aunt's cynicism toward the Wang family of Beihai. He looked at the screen quietly and said calmly, "It doesn't matter. What matters is that it will return to the Wang family of Beihai and become the foundation of the Wang family of Beihai's continued glory." "You are no match for Li Tianlan," Phoenix said calmly, "far from it. You should know this yourself, so you want to take the sword. Where does your confidence come from?" "I'm not taking the sword." Wang Shengxiao shook his head, and his voice was a little stubborn. "That is the sword of the Wang family of Beihai. Now it should just go home." "Li Tianlan won't think so. If the invincible sword really goes to Beihai, do you think Li Tianlan will let you go?" Phoenix sneered. "Does Li Tianlan's attitude matter? What matters is that I have the right to take back what belongs to the Wang family of Beihai." Wang Shengxiao's voice was a little cold. He looked at the sword light on the screen and narrowed his eyes tightly. "With this sword, I can sweep the world. What can Li Tianlan do if he is not satisfied? You are courting death." Phoenix sat up straight and said seriously, "Don't worry." Wang Shengxiao laughed. "Aunt, Li Tianlan is not an enemy. The ownership of Xianyuanfeng is not decided by Li Tianlan, nor by me. Its only result is to become a divine weapon of the Wang family of Beihai. As for Emperor Dong's palace, we will give enough compensation." "What kind of compensation do you think can satisfy Li Tianlan's appetite?" Phoenix shook her head. Wang Shengxiao was silent for a while, and then said quietly, a group. He paused and continued, a supergroup that can compete with the Southeast Group. Chapter 881. It was snowing all over Yuzhou. The heavy snow had been falling from last night to nearly noon, and it had become an extremely rare snowstorm in Yuzhou in recent years. Li Tianlan stood in front of the French window in his bedroom, looking down at the large urban area. He looked casual and comfortable. The room was as warm as spring. Outside the window, it was snowing heavily. The wild snowstorm covered every street and every building in sight. The whole world was pale and quiet. The scene was extremely quiet, but also extremely vivid. Li Tianlan closed his eyes subconsciously. He had returned to Yuzhou last night, but he did not go to Prince Yang's mansion or the Bai family's manor. Instead, he chose a hotel on Chang'an Street. It was not that he treated Dongqing Wudi as an outsider. Prince Yang's mansion was originally his and Dongqing Rushi's wedding house. The Bai family chose the site, and the Dongqing family paid for it. But now Dongqing Rushi was unconscious in Tiannan. If he lived there with Qin Weibai, he always felt that it was a little inappropriate. It was even more inappropriate to live in the Bai family. Qin Weibai also had a property in Yuzhou, but no one had cleaned it for a long time. In addition, Li Tianlan was going to the Hidden Dragon Sea today, so he simply found a hotel nearby to stay. From Beijiang to Yuzhou, it was thousands of miles away in one night. It seemed very unusual. But for Li Tianlan, it was a completely different world. In the desert, he was pure and quiet. He didn't need to think too much about anything. The only thing he needed to pursue was his own swordsmanship. And in Yuzhou, he was the palace lord of Emperor Dong's palace, the Emperor Dong of the Dark World. The desert war had ended. The Beijiang military region and Emperor Dong's palace had tasted the bitter fruit that they didn't want to taste at all. The cruel reality was in front of him. Li Tianlan could already control his emotions, but he seemed to be still immersed in the state of raising swords in the desert, so that he still felt a little uncomfortable when he came to Yuzhou from the desert. He found it difficult to adapt to his current perspective of the world. It was an indescribable feeling. During Li Tianlan's 2 years in the desert, there had always been rumors in the dark world that he was the #1 expert in the dark world after Lin Fengting. Li Tianlan knew this. He wasn't sure if he felt pressure or how much pressure he felt, but it was undeniable that he had been making progress in the past 2 years. When he was about to break through the invincible realm, his progress in all aspects was limited to a certain height because of his body. Moreover, because he hadn't fought with anyone, he couldn't even tell how much he had improved. That year, Li Tianlan was less than 25 years old. It was really difficult for his body to support him officially entering the domain of the invincible realm. Therefore, in the process of nurturing the sword, he chose another direction of martial arts. Therefore, all the progress of the last 2 years has been completely and utterly unrestrained, in a most perfect way. Show it. The muddle-headed Li Tianlan didn't feel anything. However, when Xianyuan Feng entered the desert, when he became completely clear-minded and restrained his killing intent for the time being, when he returned to Yuzhou province and completely recovered his composure, he finally realized that something was different. The world might not have changed, but his perspective had changed. It was a kind of change that he had never thought of before. To be exact, it was a perspective of truly standing at the peak of personal strength in the dark world. Everything in sight. Snow filled the sky, skyscrapers, dense streets, surging traffic, and a boundless world. All of this became extremely fragile in his eyes. It was so fragile that he could easily destroy everything with a flick of his finger. This feeling made Li Tianlan feel novel and scared. He had almost been suppressing his desire to destroy and fight, so that he could control himself to stand here quietly. The flying snowflakes hit the French windows, making a soft sound. The breeze blew through the falling snow, and all the sounds seemed to be infinitely magnified. His perception was almost extremely sharp. Li Tianlan shook his head hard, turned around, and quietly closed the curtains. On the bed, Qin Weibai gently turned over, made a lazy sound, and opened her eyes. "Why are you awake?" Li Tianlan sat on the edge of the bed and touched her hair. Qin Weibai shook her head and rolled her eyes at Li Tianlan. Her eyes were a little hazy and blurred. The pair of eyes that seemed to be always cold and indifferent were soft, enchanting, and captivating. She wrapped herself in a snow-white velvet quilt, put her white and tender arms on Li Tianlan's palm, and whispered, "Hug me." Li Tianlan took off his pajamas, got back into the quilt, and hugged the soft and light body beside him. Qin Weibai rubbed her face against Li Tianlan's chest and murmured, "I dreamed." "What dream?" Li Tianlan reached out and gently pinched Qin Weibai's ear, and asked casually. A natural and rich fragrance filled the room. His body was so relaxed that he didn't even bother to move for a while. "I dreamed that you dumped me and told me to get out. You said you never wanted to see me again." Qin Weibai subconsciously hugged Li Tianlan, as if still immersed in the dream. Her voice was a little aggrieved and pitiful. "Ridiculous." Li Tianlan's palm made a crisp sound in the white velvet quilt. He didn't promise anything, but just laughed and scolded. "Am I a fool in your dream?" "Who knows?" Qin Weibai gently bit Li Tianlan. "Maybe I'm tired of playing." Li Tianlan sneered and looked down at Qin Weibai's cold and resentful face with a special blush. "I think you don't want to get out of bed today." "Don't." Qin Weibai screamed and seemed to wake up completely. She put one hand against Li Tianlan's chest and grabbed her clothes in a panic with the other hand. "I want to take a shower. I have an appointment today." "I can't." Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and was about to say something when his phone suddenly rang. The phone is ringing. Answer the phone, be good." Qin Weibai pushed Li Tianlan and said in a soft voice. Li Tianlan shook his head and took the phone. For a moment, the soft peaks and the warm valley were far away from him. Qin Weibai put on her bathrobe, glared at Li Tianlan, and walked into the bathroom. Li Tianlan was a little annoyed. When he picked up the phone and heard the voice, his eyes became even colder. The voice on the other side of the phone was respectful, and it could even be said to be in fear and trepidation. "Hello, Your Highness Li Tianlan. I'm Little Yuan from the cabinet office." Just by listening to the voice, Li Tianlan could imagine the cautious picture on the other end of the phone. Li Tianlan smiled and said lightly, "Do I know you?" This sentence was direct and domineering, leaving no face for the other party. The cabinet office of Zhongzhou State. In terms of rank, this was a real governor-level agency. The so-called Little Yuan was not young at all, whether in age or rank. Although he was not the chief of the general office, he was the first deputy. His real job was the chief secretary of Chen Fangqing. In Zhongzhou State, he was definitely a sensitive and powerful figure. The other end of the phone did not speak for a long time, not knowing whether it was because of anger or fear. Li Tianlan did not bother to pay attention to it, and hung up the phone. He looked at his watch, listened to the sound of running water in the bathroom, and slowly put on his clothes. The door of the bathroom was locked. Li Tianlan pushed it, but it did not open. "What?" Qin Weibai's fierce voice sounded, but it sounded without confidence. "I'm going to Hidden Dragon Sea," Li Tianlan said. The sound of running water in the bathroom was a little lower. Qin Weibai said, "I won't check out the room. I'll live here for the time being. What do you want to eat at noon?" "Whatever," Li Tianlan said indifferently. "I may not come back at noon, or I'll have lunch with the minister. I'll come back to pick you up then." Qin Weibai said. The door of the bathroom was gently pulled open. Qin Weibai's dreamy face was exposed because of the water vapor. She looked at Li Tianlan and said seriously, "Li Huaqing's conditions won't be low, but his bottom line won't be too high either. Stick to what you should." "I know." Li Tianlan pinched her little nose and turned to go out. The phone rang again when he closed the door. It was still the same number. Li Tianlan thought about it and pressed the answer button. "Your Highness Li Tianlan, I'm Yuan Shi from the cabinet office of Zhongzhou State. Here's the thing. The Prime Minister has something to talk to you alone. It's 10:20 in the morning. The Prime Minister has half an hour. Please don't be late." The voice on the phone, which had been cautious not long ago, became righteous, but it was a little trembling. Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and said coldly, "I don't have time. Let him wait." Chapter 882. Ma Si sat quietly in the lobby of the hotel and looked down at his watch from time to time. He casually responded to the flattery of the hotel general manager with a nervous expression. The hotel had been cordoned off an hour ago. The lobby was quiet and seemed a little cold. A few essential staff members stood carefully at their posts, occasionally sneaking glances at their boss. They didn't know Ma Si, but looking at the cautious attitude of their boss, even a fool knew that this seemingly strange middle-aged man was absolutely a big shot. However, such a big shot would also wait for someone. And he had been waiting for nearly half an hour, which made everyone curious. The hotel general manager, who had been carefully accompanying Ma Si, was even more curious. He was curious and a little afraid. Yuzhou was full of high-ranking officials and people with great power. Ma Si's rank was far from the highest in Yuzhou, but looking at the whole Zhongzhou state, there were few people who were qualified to make Ma Si wait here without any temper. The first deputy director of the Zhongzhou State Office of Public Affairs. With this identity, there was no need to say anything at all. It was not the Zhongzhou State Cabinet Office of Public Affairs, nor the Zhongzhou State Army Headquarters Office. It was simply the Zhongzhou State Office of Public Affairs, an institution at the level of a counselor. The so-called first deputy director could be said to be the first secretary of Zhongzhou State. How many people in the whole Zhongzhou state were qualified to make him wait here? The first secretary of the president. The hotel general manager had carefully recalled many times, but he couldn't remember which immortal came to his hotel. Director Ma, do you need to rush him? You are so busy every day so. The boss smiled and was careful. He naturally knew that the person who could make Ma Si wait here must have a powerful background, but at least he should express his attitude. Ma Si's nervous face eased a little, and he shook his head with a smile. No, I'll be here soon. He looked down at his watch again. It was 9:40. He shook his head and gave a wry smile. It had been more than 40 minutes since the meeting time, and he hadn't even received the person. The president was also self-restrained, and he hadn't rushed him until now. The boss nodded and said with a smile, recently, the shop has launched a new type of black tea, which tastes good. I'll ask someone to send it over, and you can have a taste. Ma Si nodded indifferently. Just as she was about to say something, the elevator door not far away slowly opened, and a young man who looked no more than 24 or 25 walked out unhurriedly. Ma Si bounced up like a spring, and a warm and respectful smile appeared on her face. He jogged away from his seat, and stretched out his hands from afar. His feet moved like the wind, and his smile became more and more enthusiastic. The CEO stared at this scene with his mouth agape. He subconsciously stood up and didn't know whether he should step forward or not. Ma Si's face was already smiling like a flower. His attitude was even more exaggerated than when he was with the president. Your Highness, hello, I am Ma Si. Ma Si walked quickly to Li Tianlan and stretched out her hands. Li Tianlan shook hands with him casually and said, Hello, Ma Ting. Sorry to keep you waiting. Not long at all. I just arrived too. It's snowing heavily today, so the road conditions are quite average. Ma Si said insincerely and held Li Tianlan's palm with both hands. Feeling his enthusiasm, Li Tianlan gave him a playful look. Ma Si's smile became more and more respectful, and he even bowed slightly subconsciously. His position might not be at the core, but there was no doubt that he was the person who could see the core clearly. As Li Huaqing's secretary, he knew the cause of a series of things and the process of all things. As for the ending, because it didn't happen, he couldn't speculate, but he already knew his leader's choice. Li Huaqing refused to continue to cooperate with Chen Fangqing. At this point, Chen Fangqing might still want to continue to be crazy, but no one dared to continue to play with him. The situation was imminent. What Li Huaqing wanted to do most now was to stabilize the already precarious situation. Li Huaqing wanted to stabilize the already precarious situation. The suppression of Beihai should be stopped. At the same time, Emperor Dong's palace and Li Tianlan should also make enough compensation to reach a new balance. Balance was compromise. Since there was compromise, there must be sacrifice. Chen Fangqing, who launched the termination plan, blocked the desert prison, and directly caused the death of tens of thousands of people, would naturally become a sacrifice. The whole prince group would even struggle because of this. Now there was less than a year before the election. At this critical point, The prince group would suffer unprecedented losses, even greater than the loss of Emperor Dong's palace in the desert. The Southeast Group and the Special Warfare Group, who had been holding back their anger, were eyeing covetously. Since the academics compromised, they would not give up the benefits in their hands. As for Ma Si, he naturally hoped that he could get a piece of the cake. He was Li Huaqing's secretary, and his predecessor had been sent to a province in the northwest 2 years ago. It could be said that he was a real border commander. In this election, whether Li Huaqing was re-elected or not, he would generally be sent to a position with real power. Before this election, there would be a huge exchange of interests. His name would definitely appear on the list of the academics, and he would be familiar with Li Tianlan. At that time, whether Li Tianlan would support him or not, as long as Li Tianlan did not object, Ma Si's future would be bright. Ma Si was a little emotional. He looked at Li Tianlan with full awe in his eyes. Today this young man, who was less than 25 years old, was really important in Zhongzhou State. The Li family, the Tiannan Freedom Corps, Sai City, the Giant Group, the Wang family of Beihai, the Lin clan, and even a part of the power of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. All the winds and clouds gathered on Li Tianlan. Ma Si thought of the lieutenant general in the Beijiang military region, who died in the hands of Li Tianlan. He thought of what Li Tianlan said to the microcamera before the lieutenant general died. That was a sentence that everyone was destined to never forget. If I really leave Zhongzhou State because of this, it is not that I betrayed Zhongzhou State, but that Zhongzhou State betrayed me. If Zhongzhou State does not betray me, I will not betray Zhongzhou State. Li Tianlan might have been reluctant to say this before, but now he had enough qualifications. The combat capability standing at the peak of individual force, the future that could almost unify the dark world in the future, the thriving Emperor Dong's palace, the dense network of relationships. Combining all these, Zhongzhou State had to consider the consequences of losing Li Tianlan. It was not a question of whether it could bear it. It was a question of whether it was willing to bear it. If Emperor Dong's palace and Li Tianlan did not break through the blockade of the desert prison, it might be another story. But now Li Tianlan appeared in Yuzhou. In order to stabilize the new balance, Zhongzhou State must give Li Tianlan an explanation. Even the entire prince group had to give him an explanation. Ma Si's body trembled. Thinking of the coming wind and rain, his scalp was numb, and his whole body was trembling. Don't be nervous. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. Let's go now. Don't let the president wait too long. Yes, your highness is right. Ma Si took a deep breath, bent down, and said with a smile, Your Highness, please. Li Tianlan nodded and walked in front of him, as if it was a matter of course. The boss of the hotel stood there and wanted to go forward, but he did not dare. His body was stiff, and he bent down subconsciously, feeling a little embarrassed. Your Highness, this is the general manager of the hotel. If you have any requirements, you can tell him. Ma Si introduced him with a smile in a low voice. Your Highness? What kind of strange title is this? The boss was at a loss for a moment. Li Tianlan glanced at him and nodded. My wife likes the red bean cake here very much. Yes, Your Highness. I'll arrange for it to be delivered to Madam immediately. The CEO nodded subconsciously. Li Tianlan nodded, turned around, and walked out of the hotel lobby. The CEO remained. He bent over until Li Tianlan and Ma Si walked out of the hotel. Then he straightened up a little and wiped the cold sweat on his forehead. He did not know who this highness was, but this person's aura was too sharp. He looked ordinary, but standing in front of him, he almost couldn't breathe. It was not until his figure completely disappeared that the CEO suddenly remembered that because he was too nervous, he did not even introduce himself. It was snowing outside the hotel. Ma Si walked down the stairs of the hotel, took a few quick steps, and personally opened the door of the car with a red flag with a special license plate. Li Tianlan sat inside and looked at the wind and snow outside the window in silence. The hotel was not far from the hidden Dragon Sea. Ma Si carefully chatted with Li Tianlan for a while, and found that Li Tianlan was not in the mood to chat, so he turned on the stereo in the car. Before the music was finished, the car had slowly entered the hidden Dragon Sea. The hidden Dragon Sea was covered with silver, but the road had been cleared. The car stopped in front of Jinxiu Pavilion, and Li Tianlan's eyes were fixed on the front door of Jinxiu Pavilion. Li Huaqing was standing there with an easygoing smile, and seemed to be enjoying the snow. Whether it was enjoying the snow or something else, he stood here at this time, which could be said to give Li Tianlan enough face. Ma Si quickly opened the door for Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan took a deep breath and walked out of the car. Tianlan is here. Li Huaqing smiled gently and waved to Li Tianlan. President. Li Tianlan nodded and looked seriously at the old man who seemed to leave a way out for himself at any time. His voice was a little cold. President, you are in a good mood. Li Huaqing laughed and walked over with a cigarette. The snow fell on him and dyed him with a faint layer of white. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly, and a sword in tint appeared beside him. As soft as the wind, it swept the white snow on Li Huaqing. It doesn't matter. Li Huaqing walked to Li Tianlan and took a drag of the cigarette. He looked up at the white snow in the air and said meaningfully, "This snow is very clean." Li Tianlan looked at him quietly and did not speak. Walk with me. Li Huaqing patted Li Tianlan on the shoulder and stepped forward. Let's have a casual chat and have lunch together. Li Tianlan followed Li Huaqing and said flatly, I'm not here to have a casual chat. Well. Li Huaqing nodded and smiled. Then what do you want to talk about? About Zhongzhou State. Li Tianlan looked at Li Huaqing. I don't know if I am qualified. Li Huaqing was silent for a while and said softly, I remember you said 2 years ago that you are the overall situation of Zhongzhou State. I said it before I went to the desert. Li Tianlan said flatly. You said that I would be qualified to say this after I came out. Now I came out, and my view has not changed. From now on, I am the overall situation of Zhongzhou State. So, Li Huaqing's voice was a little vague in the wind and snow. You're a good president, Li Tianlan said calmly. Even now, I have no hostility to you. In your position, you are more qualified to say this than me. But you are not the overall situation, but the person who controls the overall situation. You have done a lot of things for Zhongzhou State and indulged a lot of things, such as the Wang family of Beihai and Chen Fangqing. This may be the overall situation in your eyes. But now I am standing here. In the future, Zhongzhou State should also take me as the most important. His voice paused, and his tone became extremely tough. This is not a discussion. This is my request. The person who controls the overall situation. Li Huaqing was silent for a long time before he laughed softly. His tone was a little complicated, and the question was extremely sharp. He looked into Li Tianlan's eyes and asked directly, Can I control you? Li Tianlan's voice was as calm as water, without any ups and downs. He said something he had said before. Zhongzhou State does not betray me, and I will not betray Zhongzhou State. Chapter 883. Li Huaqing looked at Li Tianlan thoughtfully, and his eyes were as deep as desire. He had heard this sentence before. Li Tianlan said it in Eastern Europe, and it soon reached his ears. At that time, Li Tianlan said it reluctantly. But now he really had this qualification. That was the problem. It was not a question of whether Li Tianlan could say it or not, but whether he had this qualification. There were many reasons for love, but it was absolutely impossible to let it down. From an individual's standpoint, everyone was very patriotic, but the premise of patriotism was that the country everyone loved had never let him down. Countless policies, constantly promoted reforms, and public opinion propaganda were like rays of light, radiating to all parts of the country. Everyone's life was getting better and better, and the country was getting better and better. This virtuous cycle led to the prosperity of Zhongzhou State today. For the vast majority of Zhongzhou State people, the country might owe something, but it would never let anyone down. Ordinary people were the same. So was Li Tianlan. He now stood at a high place, and had the qualification to stand at a high place. Naturally, he also had the qualification to ask Zhongzhou State not to let him down. Whether he betrayed Zhongzhou State or Zhongzhou State betrayed him, when the follow-up effects continued to ferment, it would evolve into a disaster that swept the entire Zhongzhou State. He had too many things. Behind him also represented too many things. just like what he said himself. From now on, he was the overall situation of Zhongzhou State. Li Huaqing was the president of Zhongzhou State, and the most qualified person to represent Zhongzhou State. Li Tianlan repeated this sentence again in front of him, and the meaning was already very obvious. You don't let me down, and I won't let you down. To put it bluntly, you have to support me this time. Li Tianlan's expression did not change at all. The two were less than 2 meters apart. Through the wind and snow, Li Huaqing could clearly feel the other party's fierce and almost tough attitude. It was like flying snow in winter falling on his face, with a slight tingling. The Prime Minister is really too impulsive. Li Huaqing was silent for a while and said softly. Li Tianlan turned his head and glanced at him. The other party's voice was very soft, but he knew very well that this was Li Huaqing's official statement. He had this attitude in private, and when he left Hidden Dragon Sea later, Li Huaqing's statement to the outside world would also be the same. The next turmoil in Zhongzhou State would also start from this sentence. This isn't just impulsive. Li Tianlan said flatly. This is a crime. His so-called impulse directly buried the most elite troops of Emperor Dong's palace in the desert, and tens of thousands of soldiers in the Beijiang military region became souls of the dead. For someone as powerful as him, one decision can easily kill tens of thousands of people. Even if he is the Prime Minister, he can't bear the consequences of this series of consequences. I don't need to pay for his mistakes. What do you want to do? Li Huaqing declined to comment. A debt of blood must be paid with blood. There's nothing much to say. No matter who it is, they must pay the price. Li Tianlan's voice was as cold as ice. Li Huaqing narrowed his eyes and stopped in his tracks, looking at the hidden ocean in front of him. Under the wind and snow, the surface of the Hidden Dragon Sea was calm. I can ask him to apologize to you, of course, in private, but the cabinet will increase its support for Emperor Dong's palace in the future. In addition, the Prime Minister has been too busy recently. His health isn't very good either, so he can go to the south to recuperate. Xingyang can temporarily take charge of the cabinet's affairs. I believe that Comrade Wu Jingmin can become Xingyang's right-hand man. Li Tianlan glanced at him. He didn't care about private apologies. No matter how humble Chen Fangqing was, it was meaningless. But to increase the support for Emperor Dong's palace, it had to be done. With less than a year to go before the election, asking Chen Fangqing to recuperate in the south was basically equivalent to an early retirement. The second Prime Minister, Hua Zhengyang, was in charge of the cabinet's work, and the Deputy Prime Minister, Wu Jingmin, was further promoted to the second Prime Minister, which was equivalent to a director's position. There was no doubt that this was the offer of the academics, and also an explanation that Zhongzhou State intended to give Li Tianlan. A director's position, this was the most important bargaining chip. Neither Li Huaqing nor Li Tianlan worried about whether these things would become a reality. Not to mention the academics that Li Huaqing completely controlled, and the giant group that fully supported Li Tianlan. Even within the Prince Group, dissatisfaction with Chen Fangqing had reached the limit after the blockade operation failed. This failure not only put Chen Fangqing's position in jeopardy, but also the leaders of the Prince Group were psychologically prepared for the great loss of vitality of the group. The Prince Group just wanted to let this matter pass as soon as possible and reach a new balance, so it was impossible for them to oppose Wu Jingmin. Therefore, in Li Huaqing's words, although the director's position was an important bargaining chip, the focus was on Hua Zhengyang. This was a deal. Li Huaqing was almost certain to be re-elected, and Hua Zhengyang was the vice prime minister of Zhongzhou State, so he also had one more term. However, it seemed that the academics were no longer satisfied with the position of the vice prime minister. Now they wanted to take this opportunity to promote Hua Zhengyang. Li Tianlan needed the support of the academics. And on the matter of Hua Zhengyang, the academics also needed the support of Li Tianlan and the giant group. Once the academics succeeded, the president and the prime minister of Zhongzhou State would be in the academics, and the academics would enter a period of real strength. Li Tianlan was expressionless and silent. When talking to a leader like Li Huaqing, the other party would not point out a lot of things. If he could not consider any point, he might suffer a loss. To be honest, Li Tianlan was really not used to this kind of communication. He had a headache talking for a while, but at least for the time being, he could not change anything. Li Huaqing quietly waited for Li Tianlan's answer. I don't need his apology. Li Tianlan thought for a long time and said slowly. Li Huaqing frowned slightly and waited patiently for a few seconds to make sure that Li Tianlan had finished what he wanted to say. He just didn't need to apologize. He didn't mention anything about the arrangement of the cabinet. If he didn't mention it, he wouldn't express his position. To be exact, he didn't agree. He didn't agree to let Hua Jingyang control the cabinet. Li Huaqing's eyes gradually became dignified. If it was before, Li Tianlan's will was not important at all. But at this time, if Li Tianlan said no to Hua Jingyang really couldn't do it. The war in the desert was over. Chen Fangqing had been in a desperate situation where there was no retreat. He was bound to fight desperately and use all his means to find some opportunities in the dying struggle. Under such circumstances, Li Tianlan not only had the full support of the giant group behind him, but also the Wang family of Beihai, who wanted to stabilize the situation with the help of Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace, would also agree to Li Tianlan's request. The honeymoon period between the giant group and the southeast group would not change at least before this election. If Li Tianlan said no, then, unless Li Huaqing was willing to join hands with the prince group to set off another game, it really wouldn't work. Fortunately, Li Tianlan didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. Did this mean that there was still hope? He thought for a moment and said slowly, "What do you think about the Prime Minister?" This was undoubtedly a test. He started with Chen Fangqing and slowly transitioned to the cabinet to sound out Li Tianlan's conditions. For people at Li Huaqing's level, there was nothing that couldn't be discussed. It was nothing more than checks and balances from various perspectives. But Li Tianlan really didn't want Hua Jingyang to control the cabinet. It was impossible for him to agree to this matter. Perhaps in Li Huaqing's view, giving the giant group a director position was already very sincere, but Li Tianlan didn't think so. In Li Huaqing's mind, Wu Jingmin becoming a director was tantamount to adding a heavyweight position to the giant group. The current giant group belonged to Dongqing Wudi. The future belonged to Li Tianlan. All Dongqing Wudi's actions in the past 2 years showed this. But that wasn't what Li Tianlan wanted. What he wanted was a group of his own. There might be a group of people added from the giant group, but what he wanted was a brand new group that belonged to him. One that could help the giant group, but could stand firm in Zhongzhou state on its own. For such a large group, a director position was necessary. In Li Tianlan's mind, the ideal candidate was also Wu Jingmin. Wu Jingmin was the best choice in terms of ability and experience. The only drawback was that he was a little old, and could only serve for one more term. Li Tianlan hoped that Wu Jingmin could take this position, and naturally, he also hoped that he could use this term to formally build the structure of the new group. But if Hua Jingyang controlled the cabinet, and Li Huaqing was the president, Wu Jingmin's pressure could be imagined, and he wouldn't even have much room to play. Li Tianlan absolutely didn't want to see this situation. I don't have any ideas. Li Tianlan shook his head slowly. It was not suitable for him to say too much to Li Huaqing today, and Li Huaqing wouldn't say too much to him either. This game that started 2 years ago had gone on until now. Although the situation was clear, the final result had not appeared. In other words, there were still many variables. The termination plan was exposed, and the desert war came to an end. Li Tianlan reappeared in Yuzhou, which was a stage victory. But no one could say that Chen Fangqing was really on the road to death. After all, the decisive battle in Beihai had not yet begun. If Chen Fangqing defeated the Wang family of Beihai in one fell swoop, the situation would undoubtedly become more complicated. But in the current situation, Chen Fangqing didn't have many chances. It was also because of this that Li Huaqing would meet Li Tianlan. What Li Tianlan needed was Li Huaqing's attitude. And Li Huaqing also gave a clear attitude. For Li Tianlan, this was enough. He still had too many things to consider about what the new group would be like. He looked at the flying snow in front of him and said calmly, "He did something I don't want to see, so I will naturally do something he doesn't want to see." "What is it?" Li Huaqing asked subconsciously. Li Tianlan laughed. In the wind and snow, His smiling face was a little cold and ferocious. His termination plan failed. Do you think my termination plan will succeed? Chapter 884. Deep Sea City, Nanua Province. The lights shone in the conference room on the top floor of the skyscraper. The directors of the Haoyue Group shook their heads and sighed as they walked out of the conference room. Some of them even had well-hidden resentment on their faces. The chairman of the Haoyue Group, Chun-Li, squinted at the directors who were leaving. His eyes were gloomy and his face was pale. Chairman Chun. A woman in her 30s with an alluring figure and a mature temperament walked over with a folder in her arms. She wanted to say something but stopped. Chun-Li looked at her anxious face, and he suddenly felt a wave of frustration in his heart. He picked up the teacup and took a big gulp of tea. After he thought he was mentally prepared, he nodded and said, "Go ahead." There are some problems with the number 6 plot that was auctioned in Deep Sea City. The approval process can't be completed for now. The woman, who was both Chun-Li's personal assistant and mistress, said cautiously, "Don't worry about the approval process. It's his business to start the construction ahead of schedule. I'll find someone to take care of it." Chun-Li waved his hand impatiently. "Okay." The assistant nodded and said softly, 3 hours ago, Malaysian groups stopped their cooperation with us at the same time. One of them has already paid the penalty fee." Malaysian. Chun-Li's eyebrows twitched. His eyes were cold and gloomy. However, he was indeed under a lot of pressure. He could only shake his head and say, "What else?" Many of our subsidiaries were seized in the morning. Liaodong's Snow Mountain Heavy Industry, Zhongyuan's Xiongzhou Real Estate, Jiangzhi's Red Flag Entertainment, Tianfu's Yuanhua Group, and Chun-Li suddenly raised his head and stared into the secretary's eyes. He seemed to be in disbelief and asked, "Where?" Tianfu's Yuanhua Group. The assistant obviously knew what Chun-Li was asking and gave an accurate answer again. Her face was a little pale. Chun-Li was silent for a long time. Tianfu's Yuanhua Group. Tianfu Province. This was the birthplace of the Haoyue Group. The Prime Minister, Chen Fangqing, had set up the Haoyue Group when he was the deputy governor of Tianfu. The headquarters of the Haoyue Group was currently located in the Nanua Province, but they had never given up on the management of Heaven's Sanctum. This was a behemoth with a market value of more than 300 billion Zhongzhou dollars. Among all the private enterprises in Zhongzhou State, Haoyue Group could be said to be one of the strongest hegemons. Its industries were spread across dozens of countries around the world, and it could make its voice heard in every province of Zhongzhou State. Central Plains, Liaodong of course. Chun-Li could understand that the subsidiary companies in Zhujiang and other places were in trouble, and he was mentally prepared for it. But Heaven's Sanctum? How could this be? The Yuanhua Group was the most important subsidiary of the Haoyue Group in Heaven's Sanctum, as well as a huge source of tax revenue for the entire Heaven's Sanctum. Just what kind of determination would make the Heaven's Sanctum decide to cut down this cash cow? Chun-Li subconsciously took out his phone and wanted to make a call. However, when he opened his contact list, he paused. The assistant couldn't help but take a step forward and said hesitantly, "President Chun." Chun-Li turned around and looked at him expressionlessly. "Did something happen to the Prime Minister?" The assistant's voice was cautious. The corners of Chun-Li's mouth twitched, revealing a bitter smile. "Accident?" He didn't know whether it was an accident or not. The assistant might not know some of the inside stories, but Chun-Li naturally knew enough about the Desert War. He had never thought that Chen Fangqing, who was like a god in his mind, would one day be forced into such a situation by a young man. He was Chen Fangqing's nephew, his biological nephew. The Haoyue Group was founded with the support of Chen Fangqing. For many years, the Haoyue Group had been worthy of Zhongzhou State and didn't owe anything to the people. As one of the leading private enterprises, it also played a huge role and made a lot of contributions to the society. And Zhongzhou State also deserved its contributions. This was a win-win situation. But now, was the situation going to change? Chun-Li silently put down his phone. He originally wanted to call Chen Fangqing, but he suddenly thought that if he handled this matter well, could he also relieve some of his uncle's pressure? Chun-Li stood up, made up his mind and said calmly, "Prepare the car. Let's go to Tianfu province." The assistant turned around and left in a hurry. Chun-Li changed his clothes and went downstairs quietly. Chun-Li's exclusive black Bentley had stopped in front of the group building. Chun-Li sat in the car with the assistant. He unconsciously put one hand on the assistant's slender and elastic thigh in silk stockings, and said calmly, "To the airport." The driver started the car. The car slowly left the Haoyue group building, entered the road, and went straight to the airport expressway. Chun-Li's palm gently slid on the assistant's thigh, and the assistant intimately moved closer to him. Chun-Li closed his eyes and thought about the next situation. The assistant's phone rang. She picked up the phone. After listening to a few words, her charming face suddenly became a little ugly. "Director Chun." She gently twisted her body. "What's wrong?" Chun-Li opened his eyes. But he didn't hear the answer. The assistant's rosy and beautiful little mouth was moving. But all the sounds were completely drowned out in an instant. The ear-piercing whistle occupied all of Chun-Li's hearing. The Bentley passed by the intersection. A truck that was originally waiting for the red light suddenly rushed over at full speed. The engine, which was obviously specially modified, instantly raised the horsepower of the truck to the limit. The ear-piercing whistle roared through the whole street. The truck had reached its limit of speed, and like a mad bull, it directly hit the Bentley. There was a loud bang. The body of the Bentley was completely sent flying in an instant. The huge impact completely deformed the car. The bulletproof car window suddenly shattered, and the car rolled from the air to the ground. The huge truck did not stop at all, and directly ran over the truck in a barbaric and almost brutal way. Blood splattered through the broken windows. The weight of the truck caused the fuel tank to burst. A loud explosion suddenly rang out on the streets of Deep Sea City. Flames soared into the sky. The Bentley and the truck were instantly turned into spare parts in the huge explosion. Huating Jinjiang Commercial Building. A young woman in her early 20s walked out of the gate of the commercial building with a proud look on her face. Behind her, two young men with impeccable height and appearance followed her, one on the left and the other on the right. Each of them was carrying countless bags of various sizes. "Chen Shui, should we eat first?" One of the boys asked cautiously. The woman named Chen Shui was not very beautiful. She was ordinary, but her aura was extremely arrogant. Behind her were two handsome men, who could drive countless girls crazy in any university. Against the backdrop of a lot of luxury goods, she walked in front like a noble palace master, or rather, a powerful queen. Tired? Chen Shui turned the car key in her hand. Looking at the two so-called Prince Charming behind her, a strange light flashed in her eyes. Not tired. The two boys smiled along, but their smiles were a little reserved. "Let's go to Park U." Chen Shui stretched, squinted her eyes and smiled. "I'll eat first and then you can eat. This is your reward. Do you like it?" Almost at the same time, the two boys thought of the big bed in the luxury suite of Park U Hotel. They felt a little awkward, but also a little excited, so they nodded subconsciously. Chen Shui. Her eyes were so moist that they seemed to be dripping water. With a little desire, she turned around and strode forward in her high heels. "Hurry up, or there will be punishment." The two boys started to jog directly. The three of them walked quickly into the underground parking lot. Chen Shui sat in her Mercedes-Benz. The two boys were like bullied wives, squeezing in the back with a pile of luxury goods. The parking lot was very quiet. Chen Shui licked her lips and suddenly said softly, "Do you dare to do it here?" The two boys behind her suddenly breathed heavily. Chen Shui smiled charmingly. "I'm teasing you two fools." She inserted the key, started the car, and stepped on the accelerator. "Let's go." Vroom, the sound of the engine sounded. Boom. A violent explosion suddenly blew up all the cars within a radius of more than 10 meters. The bodyguards near Chen Shui didn't even have time to react. The whole Mercedes-Benz burned fiercely in an instant. Chen Shui and the two boys let out a scream of extreme terror. The fire was raging. The super high temperature instantly melted the car and the people in it. Yuzhou Hidden Dragon Sea. Li Huaqing looked at Li Tianlan with a solemn face. "What termination plan?" he asked slowly. "It's the termination plan." Li Tianlan said casually. It's an old trick. It's not new at all. If Chen Fangqing can play, I can play, and the Wang family of Beihai can also play. Let's play together. Do you think Chen Fangqing can take it? Li Huaqing took a deep breath, thinking about what might happen. He had a splitting headache. There are many ways to get back at him. There's no need. Li Tianlan interrupted Li Huaqing directly. I like it directly, he said slowly and took out his mobile phone. There was an unread text message on the mobile phone. The text message was an address. Li Tianlan smiled, reached out his hand, and gently flicked a snowflake in front of him. The tiny snowflake was completely broken in an instant. Li Huaqing heard an extremely sharp sound of the wind. Li Huaqing suddenly remembered that when he saw Li Tianlan today, he didn't see Li Tianlan's invincible sword, nor did he see the black windbreaker that should have been on him. Cabinet Office. A middle-aged woman in her 40s slowly walked down the steps. Deputy Director Yuan personally sent her out, and was saying something with a smile. The middle-aged woman's attitude was reserved and casual. She nodded slightly, looked at the snowflakes in the air, and whispered, "This snow is really clean." Deputy Director Yuan nodded, and wanted to say something in agreement. But he opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The steps in front of the office seemed to become quiet for a moment. It was dead silent. Deputy Director Yuan froze and opened his mouth again. He wanted to speak, but there was no way to transmit any sound at all. An incomparably sharp sound of wind rang in his ears, tearing through space and tearing apart heaven and earth. The snowflakes in the sky gathered wildly in front of him, and turned into a somewhat illusory figure. The middle-aged woman opened her mouth in horror, and could not make any sound. The shadow condensed in the air, and directly covered the middle-aged woman. A short scream sounded in an instant. In front of Deputy Director Yuan, the illusory figure shattered again. In an instant, countless snowflakes passed through the middle-aged woman's body. A large amount of blood suddenly dyed the snow in front of the office. Chapter 885. What are you doing? Li Huaqing suddenly had an ominous premonition in his heart. Li Tianlan was standing beside him, but his mind was full of the sound of wind that Li Tianlan had just flicked his fingers. It was fierce and austere, which seemed to penetrate the whole city. I'm chatting with you. Li Tianlan smiled. But now there's nothing to talk about. Li Huaqing stared at Li Tianlan closely. He always felt that things would not be so simple, but he didn't know what was wrong. Suddenly the phone rang. Li Huaqing's expression tightened. He subconsciously took out his mobile phone and looked at the number. It was Ma Si. The ominous premonition in his heart grew stronger and stronger. He took a deep breath and answered the phone. President, something's wrong. Ma Si's voice came from the phone, and his tone was a little distorted. It was a very complicated tone, which included shock, fear, excitement, worry, and disbelief. Li Huaqing had a headache. He glanced at Li Tianlan, who was still standing beside him calmly, and said in a low voice, "Speak." Half an hour ago, Chen Li, the chairman of the Haoyue Group, was involved in a major car accident on his way to Deep-Sea Airport and died on the spot. 25 minutes ago, the car of the Prime Minister's granddaughter, Chen Shui, exploded. It seemed to be an accident caused by the spontaneous combustion of the car. The fire was very fierce. Chen Shui was in the car and couldn't escape. Li Huaqing's body shook violently. 5 minutes ago, Ma Si's voice continued. Miss Chen Lijuan was killed in front of the cabinet office. There was no murderer at the scene. According to Deputy Director Yuan, Miss Chen was pierced by a snowstorm and riddled with holes. Li Huaqing's arm trembled slightly. The Haoyue Group had been jokingly called Chen Fangqing's cash cow. The chairman, Chen Li, was Chen Fangqing's nephew. Half an hour ago he died. In recent years, Chen Shui was also famous in the young circle of Yuzhou and Huading. Although the eldest daughter of the younger generation of the Chen family was absurd, she was deeply doted on by Chen Fangqing. It could even be said that she was Chen Fangqing's favorite granddaughter. 20 minutes ago she also died. Chen Lijuan, Chen Fangqing's second daughter, was the chairman and general manager of a large state-owned investment group in the southwest of Zhongzhou State. She enjoyed the treatment of a governor. In a small circle of the prince group with Chen Fangqing as the core, Chen Lijuan's identity was extremely sensitive. 5 minutes ago she also died. Pierced by the wind and snow, Li Huaqing felt the wind and snow falling on his body and cursed in his heart. What kind of messy cause of death was this? His phone kept ringing. Li Huaqing hung up and looked at the phone screen. Countless notifications popped up at the same time. Major search engines, social media apps, and news websites in Zhengzhou State began to push the news almost at the same time. At 10:40 a.m., Haoyue Group's chairman, Chen Li, passed away in a car accident. For details, click. Chen Lijuan's murder happened too quickly. Chen Shui's matter seemed relatively simple. The death wish of the Haoyue Group's chairman, Chen Li, had undoubtedly become a breakthrough point. Looking at this message, Li Huaqing felt like he was looking at an extremely dangerous storm that could devour everything. There was no doubt that this was Li Tianlan and Wang Shengxiao's counterattack. Precise, ruthless, and brutal. In a situation where no one was prepared, that storm blew up from the Haoyue Group, bringing with it a touch of ferocity that everyone could feel. Li Huaqing suddenly turned his head and looked at Li Tianlan. "Did you do it?" Li Tianlan was also looking down at his phone. The Giant Group and the Southeast Group joined hands, so the resources they could use were unimaginable. Countless media outlets were crazily pushing the news of Chen Li's death. Sigh. This was indeed a counterattack. But it was just the beginning of the counterattack. In the next short period of time, countless news about the Haoyue Group would be exposed in the form of blockbuster bombs. And this was also a beginning. Li Tianlan put his phone back in his pocket, smiled, and said slowly, "I'm here." Chen Li died in Shanghai City, thousands of kilometers away. Do you really think I'm an immortal? I'm not talking about Chen Li. Li Huaqing stared at him closely. He could be sure that Chen Li's death was not done by Li Tianlan. That was not Li Tianlan's style. What was Li Tianlan's style? It was blatant. For example, he would destroy the Tang family and slaughter the Qi family. He would not hide it at all. Chen Li's car accident and Chen Shui's death were perfectly arranged. It was the kind of perfection that no one could find any clues at all. This was clearly the style of the Wang family of Beihai, or Wang Shengxiao's style after losing Wang Tianzong. Chen Lijuan's death was completely different. The wind and snow pierced into the body. As long as anyone was not stupid, they could basically guess that it was sword energy. In the Desert War, Li Tianlan had fully demonstrated the ability to kill people from a distance. Everyone would suspect Li Tianlan, and even believe that it was done by Li Tianlan. Is it you or not? Li Huaqing growled in a low voice. The smile on Li Tianlan's face faded little by little. He looked at Li Huaqing and said expressionlessly, "If I hadn't investigated Chen Lijuan clearly, I would even think that she was your daughter." Li Huaqing's momentum stagnated. "You're supporting me now." Li Tianlan stared into Li Huaqing's eyes, and his voice was strong and cold. "Is this your way of revenge?" Li Huaqing sneered. "This is just the beginning," Li Tianlan said lightly. "What I said is that I will support you." Li Huaqing was silent for a long time before he spoke in a low voice. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. He found this sentence very interesting, and it was also very suitable for his current needs. Li Huaqing would support Li Tianlan. But it did not mean that he supported Li Tianlan now. Was he still leaving some leeway? Waiting for the result of the final battle in Beihai? Was there still hope for Chen Fangqing? Li Tianlan smiled. Then he said calmly, "This is your style. How to support you is something I need to consider. Tianlan, remember your identity. You are from Zhengzhou State and the biggest reliance of Zhengzhou State in the next few decades in the dark world. After all, the Prime Minister is the Prime Minister. His family should be protected. Don't break the rules otherwise." "Are you threatening me?" Li Tianlan interrupted Li Huaqing's words and laughed strangely. Li Huaqing frowned. "This is not a threat. The rules. What are the rules? Tell me what." "Yes. Rules." He took a step forward and approached Li Huaqing. When the plan termination was launched, who told Chen Fangqing the rules? When the plan was exposed, who told Chen Fangqing the rules? When the blockade was carried out and more than 1,000 soldiers of Emperor Dong's palace died in the desert, where were the rules? So you tell me, damn it. What? Yes. Rules? Li Huaqing did not move. Looking at Li Tianlan's eyes that were almost spitting fire, he did not give in at all. I also told the Prime Minister this. Don't break the rules. Li Tianlan nodded and took a step back. But obviously he didn't listen. What a coincidence. Now I don't listen to what the rules are and how others treat me. That's how I treat others. What are the rules? In this matter? Li Tianlan suddenly turned his head. In the wind and snow, Chen Fangqing's figure appeared in the distance. Li Tianlan smiled. He tugged and said in a cold voice, I am the rules. Li Huaqing took a deep breath and did not speak. He turned his head and also looked at Chen Fangqing, who was rushing from a distance. There was no image. It seemed that because he was in a hurry to go out, Chen Fangqing did not even have time to put on a coat. He was wearing a thin white shirt, and his hair was messy because of the wind and snow. His majestic face was no longer serious, but with unconcealed anger and killing intent. He strode in front of Li Tianlan, and did not even look at Li Huaqing. Li Tianlan did not move and looked at him quietly. He looked at the culprit who almost destroyed Emperor Dong's palace. Chen Fangqing reached out and grabbed Li Tianlan's collar. His movement was powerful and manic, and his arms were shaking violently. Chen Fangqing pushed Li Tianlan against a tree. The trees shook. Countless snowflakes fell down. Did you do it? Tell me, did you do it? His eyes were red, and he stared at Li Tianlan like a beast that had lost its mind. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. Countless snowflakes fell through the treetops, landing on Chen Fangqing's body and his arms. The falling snowflakes were like swords. Blood appeared on Chen Fangqing's palms instantly. Those wounds were so small that no one could see them at all. But the tiny wounds accumulated to a terrifying number in an instant. Tiny drops of blood gushed out of Chen Fangqing's palms. The falling snow pierced into Chen Fangqing's sleeves, arms, chest, and back. In an instant, Chen Fangqing's upper body was covered with blood. Dark red blood stained his white shirt. It was a ghastly sight. Li Huaqing's face changed dramatically, and he said angrily, Li Tianlan, do you know what you are doing? The snow was still falling. There were more and more bloodstains on Chen Fangqing's body. Li Huaqing's eyes became completely cold. If the Southeast Group and the Prince Group severely damaged Chen Fangqing's allies in the final battle of Beihai, he did not mind supporting Li Tianlan and re-establishing a balance. But the premise was that Li Tianlan was rational enough. But now Li Tianlan was obviously crazy. Chen Fangqing's nephew, daughter, and granddaughter were all dead. But now Li Tianlan dared to attack Chen Fangqing directly? This kind of reckless madness would inevitably lead to severe punishment by Zhongzhou state regardless of the consequences. If he really dared to kill Chen Fangqing here, Li Huaqing would make Li Tianlan pay the price anyway. It was about the dignity of the entire Zhongzhou state, and then no one could protect him. Chen Fangqing did not seem to feel the pain at all. Blood spread all over his body. He felt the small wounds on his body. The wind and snow pierced into his body with blood, and the wounds kept spreading. It was like his daughter's death in front of the Office of Official Affairs. There were thousands and tens of thousands of wounds. It's really you. It's really you. Chen Fangqing clutched Li Tianlan's collar tightly, and his eyes became more and more ferocious. Li Tianlan looked at him quietly. The wind and snow were still falling. It fell on Chen Fangqing, but the sword intent in the wind and snow had disappeared without a trace. Li Tianlan was expressionless, but his eyes were full of mockery. He did not intend to kill Chen Fangqing. Even if he was really crazy, he would not dare to do so. But he made countless wounds on Chen Fangqing that were exactly the same as those on Chen Lijuan. It was like he was proving something. This was Li Tianlan's style. It was a flagrant and domineering style. Let go. He looked at Chen Fangqing and said mockingly, Do you want to die? Chapter 886. Chen Fangqing's family was not prominent, but it was not grassroots either. His family background was neither high nor low. From childhood to adulthood, he went all the way from the grassroots to the position of prime minister. In this life he had encountered many threats, but no one had ever asked him if he wanted to die. Li Tianlan's eyes were cold and indifferent. That touch of mockery flashed in his pupils, and then it turned into a faint but extremely real killing intent. Chen Fangqing trembled all over, and it could even be said that he was trembling all over. It was not fear. It was extreme anger. His eyes were red and he said word by word, "Do you dare to kill me?" He grabbed Li Tianlan's collar tightly and sneered, "Come on, kill me. I want to die now. Come and kill me. You don't have to be in such a hurry to die," Li Tianlan said seriously. The snow in the air swirled wildly. The whistling wind surrounded Li Tianlan with snowflakes. Chen Fangqing's body was directly blown away by the wind and snow, and he staggered back a few meters. Li Tianlan reached out to straighten some wrinkles in his collar, lowered his head, and said slowly, "You have to live before your family dies. You have to live before you have nothing." Chen Fangqing stared at Li Tianlan, and he was furious. "Did you hear that? Did you hear that?" Chen Fangqing suddenly turned his head to look at Li Huaqing and roared, "You heard what he said, and you know what he is doing. He is unscrupulous and lawless. What good is it for Zhongzhou State to keep this scourge alive? Kill him. You must kill him." Li Huaqing silently looked at the old man with a ferocious face and did not speak. Now Chen Fangqing was irrational and would not listen to anything. Now Li Tianlan was also irrational, and he wouldn't listen to anything. Li Huaqing was the president. But the president could not do whatever he wanted. At least for now, he could not do anything. Perhaps Chen Fangqing's biggest mistake was not realizing Li Tianlan's identity. Or it could be said that he realized it but did not want to admit it. In fact, they were all the same. Li Huaqing, Chen Fangqing, Dongqing Wudi, the Wang family of Beihai, Emperor Dong's palace, they were all the same. What a person could do depended on his position. What was the difference between Li Tianlan, who had the full support of the giant group, and the Southeast group? Li Huaqing, who had the full support of the academics, and Chen Fangqing, who had the support of the prince group. Identity? If identity could determine everything, Li Huaqing would be the president, and there would be no 6 groups in Zhongzhou State now. If identity could determine everything, there should be only 1 academics in the entire Zhongzhou State now. On the stage of power, from the top to the bottom, no one cared about who was more senior, who was older, or who had more experience. It was all fake. Everyone only cared about one thing. Whoever had the final say was the boss. Now Li Tianlan's every word undoubtedly counted in the giant group and the Southeast group. Therefore, Chen Fangqing launched the termination plan and the Desert War. Now that Li Tianlan had come out, he naturally had the right to retaliate. That might not make sense, but it was very fair. Chen Fangqing was still roaring. The death of his nephew, the death of his granddaughter, the death of his daughter. The continuous bad news caused his rationality to completely collapse. Now he was like a beast choosing its prey to devour. Suddenly, there was some pity in Li Huaqing's eyes. He was almost sure that at this point, Chen Fangqing had already forgotten their original intention of starting this game. Take down the Wang family of Beihai, eliminate the huge influence of Beihai on Zhongzhou State, make the power of the parliament more centralized, make the road of Zhongzhou State more stable, make the future of Zhongzhou State more brilliant, and let the whole country embark on a more correct path. Obviously, Chen Fangqing had forgotten everything now. The exposure of the termination plan turned the whole game into a war. In the Desert War, more than 1,000 elites of Emperor Dong's palace died, which made the whole thing completely become a personal grudge. Beihai, Emperor Dong's palace, and Chen Fangqing's personal grudge. Personal grudge. Personal grudge. The style of things suddenly lowered to such an extent. They were all figures standing at the peak of power. How could Li Huaqing intervene in the personal grudge between them? That might be the intention of Li Tianlan and the Wang family of Beihai. The original intention of the parliament, the general trend of Zhongzhou State, the future of the country, and the direction of the world. All of this was too heavy, so heavy that countless people in Zhongzhou State could not help but agree with it. Li Tianlan was too young. Wang Shengxiao was too young. They were not willing to bear these, because it meant sacrificing their own interests and even their lives. Therefore, the death of 3 people related to Chen Fangqing in a row angered Chen Fangqing, and he quietly turned the so-called game into a personal grudge. This kind of means was not presentable, but after lowering the level, It was easier for others in Zhongzhou State to accept. Li Huaqing knew very well that the most important thing was his attitude. He said he could support Li Tianlan because he was qualified. But the premise was that they solved this so-called personal grudge. Li Huaqing looked at Chen Fangqing silently and said nothing. Chen Fangqing finally understood something. He looked at Li Huaqing and then at Li Tianlan and sneered. So you choose to support him, right? He looked at Li Huaqing and asked. I'm only responsible for Zhongzhou State. Li Huaqing's voice was slow but firm. I won't intervene in your personal grudges. Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and said nothing. This was the fairest way. Li Huaqing did not intervene in the Desert War, nor would he intervene in Li Tianlan's subsequent revenge. From another perspective, this was equivalent to acquiescence. After all, Li Huaqing was the president. He represented Zhongzhou State and would not intervene in this so-called personal grudge. That was to say, what Li Tianlan and the Wang family of Beihai did not break the rules of Zhongzhou State. Chen Fangqing's body stiffened, and he was silent for a long time. He was not angry at Li Huaqing's choice. All this was destined from the moment he decided to launch the Desert War, so he had enough psychological preparation. I see. Chen Fangqing took a deep look at Li Huaqing, and his tone was a little cold. Next, it's a matter between us. He stared into Li Tianlan's eyes and said, Our business has just begun. I'm still young, and I have plenty of time to play with you. Li Tianlan's tone was a little gloomy. Chen Fangqing nodded and seemed to calm down. Everything I did was for Zhongzhou State. I owe you for the termination plan, but mainly for the Wang family of Beihai. If Emperor Dong's palace didn't move, everything in the desert would not have happened. He said slowly and closed his eyes. Wang Yuetong is my woman. Li Tianlan said blandly. You should be glad that you didn't find her. She's just a woman. Chen Fangqing was a little angry. Everything I did was for Zhongzhou State. What's the big deal about sacrificing a woman? It's nothing. Li Tianlan said casually. Everything I did was for Zhongzhou State. What's the big deal about killing your whole family? As he spoke, he chuckled softly. The woman you sacrificed is my woman. If you're really as noble as you say, why don't you sacrifice your wife? Sacrifice your daughter? Sacrifice your mother? Li Tianlan took a deep breath and said calmly, I'll go to them one by one. The Chen family in the southwest, as long as they have a little relationship with you, none of them will survive. In the future, I will play my role in Zhongzhou State and contribute my strength to Zhongzhou State. With Emperor Dong's palace, Zhongzhou State will only be more glorious than it is now. So for Zhongzhou State, please kill your whole family. You. Chen Fangqing pointed at Li Tianlan, his arm trembling violently. It's good that we've made it clear. From the perspective of your so-called big picture, you have your reasons and I have mine. If you don't want to hear enough, I can make up 100 reasons to let you die. But even if I make up 10,000 reasons, are you willing to die? So none of these matters, is it? His voice was cold and calm. Chen Fangqing took a deep breath and pointed at Li Tianlan, unable to speak. Li Tianlan slowly turned around and looked at the hidden sea under the flying snow. He said quietly, The important thing is that now you're my enemy and I won't stop until you die. The bodies of Li Huaqing and Chen Fangqing shook violently and obviously at the same time. After Wang Tianzong's silence for 2 years, they finally heard the self-name that they disliked very much again. Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan in his 20s. Where did his confidence come from? Go back. Just wait for me to kill you. Li Tianlan said softly. Puff. The corner of Chen Fangqing's mouth moved. He seemed to want to say something, but as soon as he opened his mouth, a mouthful of blood suddenly spurted out of his mouth. Fresh blood fell on the snow-covered ground. It was a ghastly sight. Chen Fangqing, whose upper body was full of fine wounds, shook and looked at Li Tianlan unwillingly. His body slowly fell down. Li Tianlan frowned but did not move. Li Huaqing held Chen Fangqing's body. Prime Minister, calm down, relax, don't get excited. Chen Fangqing's eyelids twitched and slowly closed. Li Huaqing had no time to say anything to Li Tianlan, and waved to someone not far away. Ma Si, who had been following behind, trotted over, carried Chen Fangqing on her back, and rushed to Chen Fangqing's residence. Li Huaqing took out his mobile phone and began to make a call. He nodded to Li Tianlan and followed. Li Tianlan stood where he was and looked at Chen Fangqing's limp body with no expression. Li Tianlan could feel the rise and fall of his heartbeat. Chen Fangqing did not die. He was not in a coma. He pretended to be in a coma. There were many effects of pretending to be in a coma. Not to mention what the outside world would think of Li Tianlan after the matter here was spread out. At least some of the dissenting voices in the prince group that had begun to appear recently would stop temporarily. United against a common enemy? Li Tianlan sneered and muttered to himself. It's a little interesting. Outside Chen Fangqing's office, the guards rushed to Chen Fangqing the moment they saw Ma Si. Li Huaqing and Chen Fangqing's private doctors rushed over in a hurry. Looking at the blood on his body and the corner of his mouth, the two top doctors turned pale. There was no need to stop the bleeding. The countless wounds on Chen Fangqing's upper body were too small and had now healed automatically. The doctors were busy taking blood pressure and heart rate. The guards wanted to contact the hospital, but were stopped by Chen Fangqing's private doctor. The doctor fed Chen Fangqing some medicine and was relieved when Chen Fangqing calmed down a little. Yuan Lin, the deputy director of the Office of Public Affairs, who had gone to the Office of Public Affairs to deal with some official affairs, had rushed back as soon as possible. Seeing this scene, he wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and politely sent everyone out. Li Huaqing and Ma Si did not say much and left with the private doctors. On the way back, Li Huaqing glanced at Hidden Sea. The young man who called himself the Emperor had disappeared without a trace. He shook his head and sighed. Behind the huge office was a small, exquisite courtyard. Behind the courtyard was a small wooden building that was decorated generously and comfortably. In the spacious bedroom, Chen Fangqing was lying on the bed, eyes closed and motionless. Chen Fangqing's secretary Yuan Lin sighed and stood up, wanting to go out to get a basin of water to wipe Chen Fangqing's forehead. A hand reached out and suddenly grasped Yuan Lin's wrist. Yuan Lin was slightly shocked and turned around subconsciously. He said in surprise, "Prime Minister." "Little Yuan, go and do one thing." Chen Fangqing closed his eyes and did not open them. His voice was terrifyingly calm. "Go ahead." Yuan Lin took a deep breath and said respectfully, "Get in touch with someone." Chen Fangqing said softly. Yuan Lin nodded and approached Chen Fangqing, asking in a low voice, "Who?" Chapter 887. The Western restaurant near the top floor of the hotel was spacious and quiet. The red bean cake, steak, and ice cream here were all famous in Yuzhou. But it seemed that because of the heavy snow, the flow of customers was much less than usual. The sky in Yuzhou was very cold. However, burning gazes kept converging in the Western restaurant. Most of the eyes came from the guests in all corners of the restaurant, and the waiters shuttling in the restaurant. Everyone's eyes would inadvertently sweep over a position near the window of the restaurant, then quickly shift their eyes, and then shift again. Qin Weibai sat there, like a dreamy and dazzling scenery. Her dark green dress outlined her slender and perfect figure, and her long hair casually spread out. Her sitting posture was elegant and quiet, and her exquisite and perfect face seemed to have been moisturized last night. There was still a slight blush on it, and it was tender and beautiful and flawless. Quiet, cold, lazy, noble, and calm. Different people had different beauty in their eyes. This was a stunning young woman who could satisfy all the perfect fantasies of all men. It was a scenery, a dream, and a bright light that could hardly be looked at directly. Most people were secretly watching her. It was not that no one was shameless enough to strike up a conversation with her because of their so-called wealth, but no one could get within 5 meters of this dreamy young woman. A tall European woman exuding a wild charm stood behind her, standing 2 meters away from her. Anyone who tried to get close to her was blocked by this European woman. When she didn't need to move, she stood quietly behind the young woman, focused and almost devout, like a statue. Is everything normal in South America? Qin Weibai took a small bite of the cake, subconsciously licked the cream on her lips, narrowed her eyes, and seemed to be a little excited. Everything is normal. Horsewoman, who rushed back to Yuzhou from the headquarters of the Lin clan, said softly, So far, the Jiang family of South America has made no other moves. Qin Weibai tapped her red lips with the silver spoon used to dig the cake in her hand and whispered, "It should be soon. Everything has been arranged according to your previous instructions. There will be no accidents." Qin Weibai said and ate the cake carefully. From Lin Fengting to Qin Weibai, the two patriarchs of the Lin clan had always done a good job in hiding from the world. The headquarters of the Lin clan, and even most of its branches, were far away from the countless storms of the dark world. But specifically speaking, the branch of the Lin clan in South America was now the focus of the whole clan. The Jiang family of South America intended to target the Wang family of Beihai. It was impossible for them not to consider the attitude of the Lin clan, or rather, Lin Fengting. After all, he was now recognized as the #1 expert in the dark world. The Jiang family of South America didn't dare to start a war with the Lin clan. Even in their heyday, they didn't have the guts. But it was not a problem to put on a show and drag the Lin clan's attention to the branch in South America. Only when they were sure that Lin Fengting wouldn't intervene in the decisive battle in Beihai could they act without scruples. The phone screen was still lit up. The push notifications from the various apps on the phone almost never stopped. All the media were focusing on reporting the death of the chairman of Haoyue Group in a car accident. This was not the same as the previous push. It was the second wave. A large number of people had already begun to analyze the cause of death of the chairman of Haoyue Group. Qin Weibai casually flipped through her phone, her crystal-clear eyes calm and indifferent. The heat was on in the dining room. However, the temperature dropped a little without a change in expression. Wisps of faintly discernible sharp sword intent surrounded the entire restaurant. Two middle-aged men came in. Qin Weibai glanced at them. "Boss." Saint and military counselor spoke at the same time. Without black cloaks or hiding their whereabouts, both of them were dressed in casual clothes. Under the gaze of countless people in Yuzhou, they came to Qin Weibai. Military counselor's smile was easygoing and vague. He stood with the saint. His own force field and Saint's sword intent merged with each other and enveloped his body. No one could see military counselor's appearance clearly. "Sit down." Qin Weibai nodded. "Want to eat something?" "Okay." Military counselor, who rushed to Yuzhou overnight, didn't stand on ceremony. He took the menu from the waiter and ordered some food, while Saint asked for a glass of water. "How's the preparation going?" Qin Weibai had a small appetite. She only ate half of the cake and pushed it aside. She picked up a napkin and wiped the corners of her mouth, asking casually, "I've convinced all the people who should be convinced. There won't be any problem. Now it seems that the academic's determination is greater than we thought. When I was in the car just now, Deputy Minister Hua Zhenyang called me. He reacted very quickly." Military counselor chuckled. Qin Weibai raised her eyebrows and seemed a little surprised. "Haoyue?" Military counselor nodded with a smile. Qin Weibai thought for a moment and smiled. "It's a good entry point. But the plan of the Wang family of Beihai is like a wedding dress for you. Zhengzhou State can't go to the Wang family of Beihai at this time. I can say that I'm their best choice." Military counselor smiled. "And the worst choice? If they know that you're military counselor, their expressions will be wonderful," Saint said lightly. Military counselor's identity was very sensitive to the outside world. It was even more so for Zhengzhou State. In fact, from the very beginning of his rise in Zhengzhou State, all the groups had been trying to win him over. Military counselor had never made a clear statement to any party. He did not reject or get close to any of them. He had maintained a relatively good relationship with the Big Six. Over the years, no one had been able to rope him in, but he had secretly roped in many people from the Big Six. "It doesn't matter." Military counselor's smile faded a little and he said softly, "I'm ready, so the big fish is ours. I eat the meat, and the Wang family of Beihai can at least drink the soup. But in the end, even if Haoyue can eat all of it, it won't have a big impact. The important thing is Hua Zhenyang. This person has been a little too active these days." Among the 9 directors of Zhengzhou State, Hua Zhenyang was relatively young. He could be said to be the youngest group of people, about the same age as Dongqing Wudi. After being the deputy minister for one term, His ability had been affirmed, and his prestige and qualifications were enough. When Li Huaqing and Chen Fangqing cooperated before, Hua Xingyang's performance was not very obvious. Although he did take action, he also restrained his actions. Now that Li Huaqing and Chen Fangqing parted ways, all of Hua Xingyang's intentions were completely exposed. What he wanted to fight for was the position of the head of the cabinet, from the deputy minister to the real prime minister. If there were no games between Zhongzhou State and Beihai, if there were no so many accidents, the position of prime minister should have been Wen Siyuan, the speaker of Beihai province. But now Beihai was in chaos, and Chen Fangqing was destined to retire. After Li Huaqing was confirmed to be re-elected, the position of the head of the cabinet, which had not been clearly owned, became a position that all parties were determined to get. Hua Xingyang could be said to be unique in his current position, and he had a great chance of getting the position. Li Huaqing would definitely fully support Hua Xingyang. Even for him, Chen Fangqing had suffered a great loss. After the Prince Group suffered a great loss, Li Huaqing hoped to see the emergence of an extremely powerful academics. At that time, the academics would occupy the positions of president and prime minister, and they would be able to better control the overall situation. This kind of extremely strong situation was absolutely not what he wanted to see, because it also meant that under the strength of the academics, any emerging group would struggle. Qin Weibai thought about it and shook her head. Don't worry, Tianlan will handle it. Military counselor nodded and did not say much. The core framework still needs one core. Have you communicated with the giant group? Qin Weibai asked. Military counselor wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. He glanced at Saint. Saint's expression was a little strange. Let the palace master communicate with the minister and the Bai family about this matter. Not to mention me, who in the whole Zhongzhou state dares to hit on Dongqing Wudi's wife? Qin Weibai smiled slightly. Well, it's better for Tianlan to go. Bai Qingqian will agree, and so will Dongqing Wudi. He should be very clear that a new group is much better than letting Tianlan take over the giant group. In the core structure of the new group, the current deputy prime minister, Wu Jingmin, was undoubtedly the core. Li Tianlan would concentrate all his efforts to push Wu Jingmin to the position of director. The position of prime minister was very difficult, and the position of deputy prime minister seemed to be the best now. The positions of counselor and deputy prime minister left by Wu Jingmin were the second core of the new group. At present, there were limited candidates for this position. There were even fewer candidates who could be trusted, had enough ability, and could continue to maintain close ties with the giant group. The best candidate was undoubtedly Bai Qingqian. Regardless of qualifications or ability, she was qualified to be a counselor. The third core was Zhou Yuanshan, the speaker of Jiangxia. Wu Jingmin, Bai Qingqian, Zhou Yuanshan. These three people were enough to plan the future of the new group for at least 20 years. The peak period of the new group would also be when Zhou Yuanshan reached the top 20 years later. The Dongqing clan had unconditionally supported Li Tianlan. With the addition of Bai Qingqian and Zhou Yuanshan, the core personnel of the three pillars of the giant group would enter the new group. This would also make it more convenient for the new group to absorb talents from the giant group, but it would not take over the system of the giant group. Everything was for the best. Indeed, the giant group is too loose. Although the cohesion has increased after the reshuffle, in the end, the main departments of the giant group are still the giants from all over Zhongzhou state. Each of them has different interests. If the palace master wants to control the giant group in the future, he will inevitably waste too much energy. It's better to turn the power in his hands into a new group. Qin Weibai turned to look at the wind and snow outside the window. The wind and snow swept through Yuzhou, covering the sky and covering the earth. There is less than a year left. She whispered to herself. The vigorous new group, Emperor Dong's palace that ruled the world, and Li Tianlan who was invincible in the world. All of this will become a reality in less than a year. It was no longer a plan. It was reality. Take down Chen Fangqing, and disrupt the decisive battle in Beihai that he pushed at all costs. All of this was within his reach. Keep a close eye on Beihai. Qin Weibai whispered. Do you have any exact news about those invincible realm experts? Tianhai Wuji and Yagyu Sumi have returned to East Island. Military counselor said calmly. The dark forces of East Island have been very active recently. They seem to have put a lot of effort into it. Wang Xiaoyao has also returned to Eastern Europe. He should be keeping an eye on Sai City at the border of Snow Country. Situt Songyue is stalled. All signs show that there must be a core behind the Jiang family of South America, East Island, Wang Xiaoyao, and the Vatican. In this alliance, there must be someone playing a position similar to the leader. But we have no clue who this person is. If this person really exists, he may cause us big trouble. It's nothing more than another version of Samsara Palace. Qin Weibai whispered. It's just that he is more tolerant than the palace master. And his purpose is more complicated. Boss, do you know who he is? Saint raised his eyebrows. Qin Weibai hesitated and whispered. I have a guess, but I'm not sure. A sharp look flashed in Saint's eyes. Since you have a guess, why don't alert him. You're definitely not his match now. His state is very special. It's probably equivalent to another state of Tianlan. Qin Weibai shook her head. If so, let His Highness do it in person. Military counselor said half a sentence. He paused subconsciously. Qin Weibai looked at him quietly and didn't speak. She wasn't sure who the person hiding in the dark was, but she had some guesses. Similarly, the person hiding in the dark was not sure who Qin Weibai was now, but he would also have some guesses. If Qin Weibai's guess was wrong, it would be a mistake. But if she was right, what would happen? Qin Weibai frowned and whispered. It's a little troublesome. Military counselor was silent for a while, and quietly changed the topic. Jiang Guochu and Mo Raid's current whereabouts are unknown, but there are no invincible realm killers. There are signs that he seems to have entered Zhongzhou state. Qin Weibai's eyes suddenly froze. Are you sure? She asked softly. I'm not very sure. This kind of invincible realm killer is the most difficult to grasp. It's almost impossible to find his trace. What I have now are some vague clues. I'm not even sure if he is in Zhongzhou state. Military counselor said with a bitter smile. Qin Weibai murmured thoughtfully. If he is really in Zhongzhou state, what's his purpose? Who does he want to kill? To kill you, Saint said calmly. That's the most likely reason. There's another person. At present, he's even more important than me. Qin Weibai said quietly. Oh, Wang Yuetong. Military counselor and Saint looked at each other. Wang Yuetong. Chen Fengqing's termination plan. Didn't he give up his evil intentions? They can't find Wang Yuetong. Military counselor said slowly. Maybe it's because of this that you can't find the Jew. Qin Weibai looked at military counselor meaningfully and said word by word. Find the Jew and use the method you think is the best. Military counselor smiled bitterly. He knew what Qin Weibai was hinting at. He sighed and shook his head, looking down at the steak that the waiter had just served. The medium-well steak was his favorite, but under Qin Weibai's gaze, the steak in front of him suddenly didn't taste good. The phone rang. Horsewoman standing behind Qin Weibai picked up the phone, handed it to Qin Weibai, and said softly, It's His Highness. Qin Weibai's eyes softened. She took the phone and glanced at military counselor faintly. Military counselor subconsciously avoided Qin Weibai's eyes. He was so hungry that he completely lost his appetite. Tianlan, have you finished talking? Qin Weibai answered the phone and smiled softly. Yes. Li Tianlan's voice sounded a little vague. There was an extremely fierce wind coming from the phone. I'm going to leave Yuzhou. I'll come back in the evening. I'm going to have dinner with the minister and Aunt Bai. Where are you going? Qin Weibai was a little curious. High in the sky, the bustling Yuzhou gradually receded under his feet. The wild wind and snow kept flying in front of Li Tianlan. The black windbreaker on him fluttered unscrupulously in the wind and snow high in the sky. The incomparably complex golden lines completely enveloped Li Tianlan like flames. The city receded under his feet. Li Tianlan went all the way north. He held the phone, narrowed his eyes and whispered, Sai City. Qin Weibai was silent for a while, and said with some hidden bitterness, Is it so urgent? I'm still waiting for you to have dinner with me. It's urgent. Li Tianlan chuckled and said, "Race against time. Someone once killed an invincible realm expert with one shot from 10,000 meters away. Someone once established Heaven Capital with East Island as the foundation. Someone once judged the whole dark world with his own power. There had also been someone who had ended the Supreme Chosen One in the sky above Mormonts. It was all in the past. The once magnificent era had passed. In his era, everything. He would do it himself." Chapter 888. Number 16 Qingming Alley Yuzhou. 2 years ago, for the huge Yuzhou, this was a completely dispensable place. For the past 2 years, this place had always been an extremely awkward place. Today, 2 years later, this place had almost been completely forgotten by people. Number 16 Qingming Alley was not a small place. It was a courtyard house. Although it was a little old, the environment was still passable. In Yuzhou, where the pace of life was so fast that it made people dizzy, this area could be considered a leisurely place. A leisurely area. A group of people who didn't want to wait for death. Therefore, the atmosphere in the courtyard house had always been very strange. The falling snow dyed the courtyard and walls of the courtyard house white. There was a reclining chair in front of the entrance hall of the courtyard house. Lu Qing was lying on the reclining chair, watching the snowflakes slowly fall on his body. His eyes were numb, like a salted fish without a dream. There were people busy in every room of the courtyard house, searching for information, comparing files, analyzing intelligence. It seemed to be a very busy scene. But in fact, everyone was a little absent-minded. A middle-aged man next to Lu Qing was squatting and smoking. The tobacco fell on the snow with the hot air from his mouth. The middle-aged man shook his head with a depressed expression. "What are we now?" Lu Qing looked at the snowflakes and suddenly laughed at himself. The words of the middle-aged man, who looked extremely depressed, were even more depressing. "The task force, yes, the task force." Lu Qing nodded and smiled a little strangely. "A high position and a great responsibility. The task force sounds quite scary, but what can we investigate? The information in our hands has been turned over. Apart from the information, we have nothing else. The key is that our case has made no progress, but the person involved in the case has already swaggered to Yuzhou. What's the point of our so-called task force?" "Investigation," the middle-aged man said gloomily. His tone was so honest that it made people cry. Lu Qing seemed to be used to the other party's temper. He shook his head and suddenly said, "I want to leave this place, leave this damn place. In the eyes of Yuzhou, our so-called task force is a joke. We have always been a joke." The middle-aged man sighed and finished a cigarette before lighting another. Lu Qing didn't say anything. It seemed that he had nothing to say to the people around him. The task force had been established for 2 years. He was the third team leader of the task force. After 3 consecutive personnel changes, the task force, which had caused a sensation due to its high standards, had become more and more inconspicuous. The first leader of the task force was Yi Dongsheng, councilman rank. The second team leader was Fan Tianyin, the minister of the Ministry of Security of Zhongzhou State. The rank of a governor. Lu Qing was the third team leader. Before becoming the team leader, he was the Secretary General of the Military Secretary Office, Deputy Governor level. This position could be said to be a direct descendant of the Special Warfare Group. This was also the result of the Prince Group and the Special Warfare Group's struggle to control the leadership of the task force. And there was only one thing they wanted to investigate. That was to investigate whether Qi Mulin's family, which had been wiped out by Li Tianlan, had committed treason and whether they had colluded with the Burning Legion. After Lu Qing became the leader of the task force, his only job was to prove that Qi Mulin had nothing to do with the Burning Legion. As long as he could prove this, then Li Tianlan's annihilation of the Qi family at that time would be a felony. Regardless of what would happen to Li Tianlan, at least he would have to stay in the desert prison for a few more years. No one could find any evidence of Qi Mulin colluding with the Burning Legion. But no one could find evidence to prove Qi Mulin's innocence. This so-called task force had no direction of investigation at the beginning. Moreover, neither Yi Dongsheng nor Fan Tianyin paid much attention to this matter. This matter dragged on for almost 2 years. By the time Lu Qing came over, even if there was any previous evidence, it had been erased without a trace. This position was like a quagmire. Lu Qing was trapped in it on the first day he took office. There was no progress in the whole case since he became the team leader. Lu Qing often felt that he was a joke, and the task force was also a joke. They carried out the so-called investigation every day. Day after day, Lu Qing didn't even know whether the task force was seriously investigating or pretending. And now, the task force was not disbanded. There was no clear conclusion. Li Tianlan came directly to Yuzhou from the desert. He hadn't been in Yuzhou for a long time, but until now no one in Zhongzhou state had raised any question about it. The existence of the task force seemed to have been completely forgotten. Lu Qing felt that he really seemed to have become a joke. He couldn't find any evidence, and he didn't know how long he would have to suffer in this courtyard house. He lay on the recliner, looking at the snowflakes in the sky, and said with numb eyes, "What do you want to eat for lunch?" "Instant noodles?" The middle-aged man who was smoking beside him looked depressed. He was different from Lu Qing. Lu Qing served as the team leader of the task force, and the Special Warfare Group had high hopes for him. They hoped that he could find some evidence that could directly hit Li Tianlan. He was shouldering a heavy burden. But with the departure of Yi Dongxing and Qin Fangqing, more and more people didn't take the task force seriously. Now the personnel transferred and were basically players who were not successful in various units. The middle-aged man's name was Li Liang. Before he came to the task force, he was the deputy director of a department of the police department. When he came, he also received a punishment. The others were roughly the same. For them, whether in their original units or in the task force, they were a joke, so it didn't matter where they were. "Let's eat hot pot." Lu Qing felt the cold in the air, and his heart was also cold. He was from Xinnan City, and at this time he particularly missed the hot pot in his hometown. "Are you treating?" Li Liang raised his head and glanced at him. "Do you want to drink at noon?" Lu Qing looked a little annoyed. After a moment of silence, he said hoarsely, "Then let's eat instant noodles." "Team leader is right. Let's eat hot pot. My treat." A hearty laugh suddenly rang out. A strong and burly figure walked in the door, and his voice was loud. Lu Qing's eyes narrowed and he said lightly, "Director Guo, you're in a good mood." Guo Yu, the director of the intelligence department of the General Staff Department, and the first deputy team leader of the task force. Under the situation that the General Staff Department was managed by Yi Dongxing, Guo Yu could be said to be Yi Dongxing's direct confidant. He was not pushed to be the deputy team leader of the task force, but he was here in name only and rarely appeared on weekdays. In other words, he still worked in the General Staff Department. The deputy team leader was a part-time job. And Lu Qing no part-time job. "Yes, I'm in a good mood." Guo Yu glanced at Lu Qing with a smile. Looking at his salted fish expression, Guo Yu's eyes were a little pitiful. He held the file in his hand and glanced at Lu Qing sympathetically. This team leader still didn't know what the file in his hand meant. "Don't rush to eat, team leader. I have something important to report to you." Guo Yu stopped smiling and said with a serious face. Lu Qing was stunned, and then subconsciously sat up straight. "There's progress in the case." "Yes." Guo Yu nodded. "The General Staff Department received some news that there's a major breakthrough in the case." He handed the file in his hand to Lu Qing and looked at him with more and more pity in his eyes. Lu Qing's hands and feet were cold, and his hand holding the file trembled a little. He didn't know what the so-called major breakthrough was. But the breakthrough in the General Staff Department made Guo Yu so happy. There was no doubt that this clue was beneficial to the Wang family of Beihai, or to Li Tianlan. And the person behind him absolutely didn't want to see this result. Lu Qing took the file and didn't dare to open it for a while. Lu Qing looked at him silently. He looked at his slightly trembling hand holding the file. Lu Qing lowered his head and opened the file little by little. Until this moment, he didn't know that maybe his hands would completely change the current situation of Zhongzhou state. The file was opened little by little. A confession that was obviously just recorded appeared in front of Lu Qing. The content of the confession was very long. There were a few pages of densely written paper. In addition to the confession, there were a few photos and a small recording device. Lu Qing kept taking deep breaths and flipping through the confession in front of him. The photos were mixed in the paper and appeared in front of him when he flipped through the confession. There was a middle-aged man in the photo. In front of the middle-aged man sat a dignified old man. Lu Qing's heart suddenly jumped. The huge pressure made him a little suffocated for a while. He stared at the photo in front of him and seemed to be a little unbelievable. He trembled and said, "Who is this?" Guo Yu knew what he was asking. There were two people in the photo. One of them didn't need to be asked, but the other needed to be explained. He smiled and said in a firm voice, "This person's code name is Black Eagle, a senior staff officer of the Burning Legion, a confidant of Legion Commander Ramelun, and one of the core military counselors of the Burning Legion. The confession is very clear that he was originally from Zhongzhou State, so after the Burning Legion took root in Tiannan, he was responsible for all the operations of the Burning Legion in Zhongzhou State." Guo Yu's voice was like thunder, rumbling in Lu Qing's ears. In other words, he is the main person in charge of everything of the Burning Legion in Zhongzhou State. Crack! The wooden deck chair suddenly broke. Lu Qing suddenly stood up and stared at Guo Yu. His expression was a little frightened, but more incredulous. "You," he kept taking deep breaths and finally roared, "How dare you?" "It's the truth." Guo Yu looked at him and said calmly, "The evidence is in your hands." The photo slipped down with Lu Qing's trembling hand and fell on the snow. Li Liang, who was squatting and smoking, glanced at it and subconsciously broke the cigarette between his fingers. Lu Qing took a deep breath and couldn't speak for a while. The task force that had been set up for 2 years had investigated many times, but he never dreamed that there would be such a so-called evidence. To prove that Qi Mulan committed treason? Lu Qing laughed, laughing with incomparable fear. He found that his thinking was still too simple. In the photo, the person facing Black Eagle was not Qi Mulan at all. It was the top leader behind the scenes of the Special Warfare Group. Qi Baizong, the former director of Zhongzhou State, and the executive minister of the army headquarters. If the so-called evidence was spread, it would be a fierce storm that could sweep the whole Zhongzhou State. Lu Qing's voice was hoarse. "What the hell do you want to do?" Guo Yu bent down to pick up the photo and said lightly, "I'm just doing my duty as a member of the task force." Chapter 889. Lu Qing looked down at the confession in his hand. The paper of the confession swayed slightly with the movement of his arm. He only felt that all this was extremely absurd. The confession was very long. The content was detailed and explosive. The man codenamed Black Shadow explained a lot of problems from beginning to end. To be exact, it was a series of cooperation problems between the Burning Legion and the Special Warfare Battalion. The target was not Qi Mulan. It was not even Qi Baizong. It was the whole Special Warfare Group. In the confession, Black Shadow said that the Burning Legion was Ramiro, the commander of the Burning Legion whom Qi Mulan met when he visited Africa. Then the cooperation between the two sides continued to deepen. As Emperor Dong's palace continued to develop and became a threat to Kunlun City, Gu Xingyun, the governor of Kunlun City, personally invited the Burning Legion to Tiannan and asked Ramiro to severely damage Emperor Dong's palace. Then the Burning Legion entered Tiannan and got the support of Annan State. The Burning Legion became a channel of communication between Kunlun City and Annan State. Up to now, the secret cooperation between the three parties had not stopped. In the past 2 years, Kunlun City had secretly leaked countless secrets of Zhongzhou State to the Burning Legion and Annan State. The confession was clear and concise. Even Lu Qing wasn't sure if this was true or not. True or false. It didn't matter. What mattered was that Guo Yu had gotten the information through his own channels. In the case that no one could determine the authenticity, the photos, the confession, and these clues had to be handed in, whether it was true or false. Once these things entered the hidden Dragon Sea, they were destined to cause an extremely violent storm. Lu Qing himself was a member of the Special Warfare Group. He was the patriarch of the task force, and he was destined to be the one to hand in these things. He was standing in the center of the storm. When the wind suddenly rose, he didn't even have the room to resist. and he would be torn to pieces by the storm immediately. Lu Qing raised his head and looked at Guo Yu in front of him, his eyes dull. Guo Yu looked at him calmly, as if thinking about something. It was snowing heavily. The atmosphere in the courtyard suddenly became subtle. Guo Yu suddenly moved his body and said with a smile, "It is said that the team leader is an expert of the thunder-shocking realm?" Lu Qing said dully, "What do you want to say?" "A little weak." Guo Yu chuckled and said, "The intelligence department of the General Staff Department is full of elites. Those who can get to the position of director are at least at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. With the strength of the team leader, if he were in my place, he would at most be a section chief of a department." The corner of Lu Qing's mouth twitched. For a moment, he really wanted to kill him to keep his mouth shut. One Guo Yu and a dozen or so idlers who were not welcomed by the various departments. It did not sound difficult. It was indeed not difficult. But the problem was that he was no match for Guo Yu. "You caught Black Hawk?" Lu Qing asked in a low voice. "Yes, 3 days ago, we locked onto Black Hawk's whereabouts and captured him on the same day. These days we have been secretly interrogating him. After getting his confession, I reported the news to General Yi and came here." Guo Yu said calmly. Yi Dongxing was a member of Zhongzhou State, the deputy minister of the army headquarters, the chief of the general staff, and also the minister of the intelligence department. He could be said to be Guo Yu's immediate superior. The news reached him. No matter what, it was impossible to suppress it. Lu Qing took a deep breath and said in a hoarse voice, "Where is that shadow now? Is he still in your military intelligence agency?" The General Staff Department should not deal with Black Shadow. So after getting this confession, we informed the Special Operations Bureau of Yuzhou. The director of the Special Operations Bureau came in person and took him away when I came. Lu Qing's heart sank slightly. The Special Operations Bureau of Yuzhou had always been within the sphere of influence of Kunlun City. After the Burning Legion raided Yuzhou, the former director was suspended and replaced by Drifting Cloud of Sai City. But because most of the people in the Special Operations Bureau were from Kunlun City, Drifting Cloud's work was not smooth. Since Sai City was not peaceful recently, Drifting Cloud resigned as the director of the Special Operations Bureau of Yuzhou and returned to Sai City with Situ Tsangyue. The new director of the Special Operations Bureau of Yuzhou was still a member of the Special Warfare Group and Gu Xingyun's confidant, named Gu Xi. The other party dared to hand Black Hawk over to the Special Operations Bureau of Yuzhou, which meant that he dared to hand Black Hawk over to the Special Warfare Group. What did it mean to hand over a witness who could testify that the leader of the Special Warfare Group committed treason to the Special Warfare Group? Was the other party fearless? Or were these confessions all true? Lu Qing's heart suddenly wavered. Once again, he recalled the contents of the confessions. Those contents clearly recorded Black Hawk's contact with Gu Xingyun and Qi Beizong. Some of them were even the original words. Gu Xingyun clearly expressed his uneasiness and irritation about the rise of Emperor Dong's palace. He thought of the cause of the rise of Kunlun City. But Li Tianlan, who had now reached the peak, the hatred was too deep, and there was no possibility of reconciliation. So Gu Xingyun mobilized the Burning Legion to raid Emperor Dong's palace in Tiannan? How logical it was. Lu Qing even somewhat believed it himself. After all, the special warfare system was different from others. There were too many dark sides and unseen places in it. The vague rules meant that there were too many means that could be used. And Gu Xingyun was not that kind of person. A man who was waiting for death would do something, and could do something when he saw Li Tianlan and the Li family rise from the ashes. Perhaps no one in Zhongzhou State would not believe this. Lu Qing was suddenly shocked and shook his head subconsciously. He actually began to doubt Gu Xingyun in his heart, doubting his own leader. He took a deep breath, held the document, looked at Guo Yu, and was in a dilemma. "Leader, maybe I should remind you." Guo Yu said faintly, "General Yi also has a copy of this information at this time, but this is the work of our task force. I think we should take some initiative." Lu Qing's mouth was full of bitterness. The so-called initiative was nothing more than to hand in the information before Yi Dongxing handed it over to the parliament. As a capable general of the Special Warfare Group, He had to hand in the evidence of the group's treason. This feeling was almost the same as the feeling of forcibly destroying oneself in a situation where one was unwilling to do so. But the information was already in his hands, and it was absolutely impossible not to hand it over. The only choice he could make was who to hand over the information first. Lu Qing took a deep breath, clenched the information in his hand, and said in a deep voice, "I see." Guo Yu grunted and looked at him motionless. Lu Qing was a little angry, subconsciously raised his voice, and snorted coldly, "Prepare the car, go to the Hidden Dragon Sea." The car soon stopped at the gate of the courtyard. Lu Qing hurriedly got in the car with the information. The car started. "Go to the Hidden Dragon Sea," Lu Qing said in a low voice. "Slow down, don't worry." The driver responded, and the car slowly left the courtyard. Lu Qing picked up the phone and dialed a number. It was difficult for him to directly contact Gu Xingyun at his level. He was looking for Gu Fengbo, the deputy governor of Kunlun City. "What's the matter?" Gu Fengbo's phone was quickly connected. "Governor." Lu Qing managed to calm down and said in a hoarse voice, "Something is wrong." The General Staff Department caught an important figure of the Burning Legion, and he confessed some problems related to Kunlun City. "I am now on my way to the Hidden Dragon Sea. Yi Dongsheng also has a copy of the same information. You'd better tell His Highness to be mentally prepared." Gu Fengbo was silent for a long time and did not speak. Lu Qing's heart became more and more chaotic. From Gu Fengbo's silence, he seemed to have a premonition of the authenticity of the information in his hand. Suddenly, the small amount of information in his hand became more and more hot. "What information?" Gu Fengbo asked. "It's a confession and a few photos." "I'll take them and send them to you," Lu Qing said. Chapter 890. There was a soft light in the almost luxurious study. The curtains were closed. One photo after another appeared on the screen connected to the mobile phone. Obviously, the photos taken by the mobile phone were placed on the screen. The content became a little blurred, but it was still clear. Because the photos were densely packed with words, the screen played very slowly. The photos rolled slowly one by one. The last one changed from words to images. In the photo, Qi Baizong, the former director of Zhongzhou State, looked gentle and seemed to be saying something to the middle-aged man sitting in front of him. Gu Fengbo, the deputy governor of Kunlun City, sat on one side of the sofa frowning. Gu Xingyun was facing the screen, watching all this silently, and kept silent for a long time. Yi Dongsheng also has the same information, and even the original of this information is in his hands. Lu Qing has no way. I guess this information has now reached the Hidden Dragon Sea. Gu Fengbo said in a deep voice. "It's ridiculous." Gu Xingyun twitched the corner of his mouth, and his voice was cold. His words showed enough confidence. Lu Qing was undoubtedly a smart man. So the confession he took with his mobile phone was all the key parts. For example, Black Hawk said that Kunlun City asked the Burning Legion to enter Tiannan to attack Emperor Dong's palace. For example, other things that Kunlun City asked the Burning Legion to do. For example, the initial contact between the Special Warfare Group and the Burning Legion. It even included some of the contents of the conspiracy between Qi Baizong and Gu Xingyun when he met them. These contents were indeed detailed enough. But in Gu Xingyun's eyes, everything was absurd to the extreme. Except that the so-called motive was correct. Everything else seemed to be off the mark. The initial contact between the Burning Legion and Kunlun City was not like this at all. As for the conversation between the man with the codename Black Hawk and Qi Baizong, it had never happened. Black Hawk said that he was the military counselor of the Burning Legion, and an important figure in contact with Kunlun City on behalf of the Burning Legion. He had seen Qi Baizong, Gu Xingyun, and Gu Qianchuan more than once, and they had also planned many things together. But in fact, Gu Xingyun had never seen Black Hawk at all. He had heard of this code name. Within the Burning Legion, Black Hawk was not even a core figure of the Burning Legion. He could barely be regarded as a high-level figure who had touched the surface. Gu Xingyun's expression was a little contemptuous, and he was a little angry in his heart, but he was not flustered. He had been in contact with the Burning Legion for a long time. It was true that Kunlun City was behind the Burning Legion's entry into Tiannan. However, Gu Xingyan was absolutely sure that he would not be caught. As for the things that Lu Qing had sent over, in his opinion, they were just child's play. They were the worst kind of framing. It didn't matter whether the leaders of the parliament believed it or not. It was naturally the best if they didn't believe it. Even if they believed it, Gu Xingyan did not panic at all. In the face of the confession sent by Lu Qing, he had 10,000 ways to easily prove the innocence of Kunlun City. A farce. Gu Xingyan shook his head. There's nothing to see. Maybe it's not just a farce. Gu Fengbo lowered his head and said thoughtfully, this may be a warning. Tell me what you think. Gu Xingyan looked at the screen in front of him and said calmly, Li Tianlan has just left the desert prison. It has been less than 24 hours since then, and this information suddenly appeared. What does this mean? Gu Fengbo laughed in a low voice. No matter what, this information is very important. If it can become a reality, it is indeed very important. Gu Xingyan said coldly. Li Tianlan entered the desert prison 2 years ago because he was guilty. The information that could prove Li Tianlan's innocence was extremely important. First of all, Li Tianlan had to get a firm foothold in leaving the prison. Everything that followed, including all of his revenge, could be carried out in a logical manner. Next, if there is no accident, Li Tianlan will pour all his firepower on the Prince Group. At this time, this information is obviously a warning to us not to interfere. If the information in the information, if it's really groundless, it can only prove that from the beginning, the Southeast Group has been suspecting that the Burning Legion has something to do with Kunlun City, but there is no evidence. Now that they have taken out this information, they want us to be overwhelmed. It's hard for you and Minister Qi to fall down, but Qi Mulan must be the scapegoat this time. They want to prove from the Special Warfare Group that Li Tianlan eliminated the Qi family for the sake of the country. At the same time, they want to disgust us and warn us not to support the Prince Group. Gu Fengbo shook his head. Gu Xingyan snorted coldly. Why should Qi Mulan be the scapegoat? I can easily explain the things mentioned in the information. They can't convict me, and Qi Mulan is naturally innocent. Li Tianlan will still have a stain on him. Black Hawk. Gu Fengbo was silent for a while and said in a low voice, no one is sure how much Black Hawk knows. After all, he is a senior of the Burning Legion. Even if what he revealed can't threaten us, he himself is a variable. The Wang family of Beihai made up the so-called evidence crudely, and didn't take it seriously. But who knows if they really have something? Even if what they have is far from the truth, it can still cause us great trouble. He picked up the teacup, took a sip and said in a low voice, in fact, I think Beihai must have something, but now they have no time to care about us. Li Tianlan, Wang Shengshao, everyone is staring at the Prince Group, and we have become secondary. Take this opportunity to clear the suspicion of the Special Warfare Group, push Qi Mulan out, and prove Li Tianlan's innocence. Then this matter will be over. The Prince Group is obviously more tempting than us now. And he paused, and his face was a little complicated with fear. As soon as Li Tianlan left the desert, he killed First Elder with one sword strike. If he didn't continue, Li Tianlan could kill Gu Qianchuan in a second, and naturally he could kill Kunlun City. Even if the Special Warfare Group didn't cooperate, Li Tianlan could force Gu Xingyan to bow down. At least under that sword light, Kunlun City was now at a disadvantage in terms of strength and force in the face of Emperor Dong's palace. Now Li Tianlan and Wang Shengshao only wanted to divide the interests of the Prince Group, and didn't care about the Special Warfare Group. But if they were serious, Gu Qianchuan also appeared in the desert, and Li Tianlan had every reason to blame him. Murderous weapon. Gu Xingyan gnashed his teeth. The sword that illuminated the desert night sky spread throughout the dark world as soon as it appeared. All the superpowers came to a relatively unanimous conclusion in the shortest time. That sword light could not be explained from any point of view of martial arts. It set off from Zhongyuan, passed Yan and Zhao, entered Dongshan, flew over Yuzhou, and went straight to Beihai. From Beihai, it passed through Longjiang Province, Suzhou Province, and entered the desert in one day. When the sword light completely lit up, from Beijiang to the desert prison, The sword light drew an arc of more than 100,000 meters. More than 100,000 meters. What did that mean? It was more than 100 kilometers away. At the moment when the sword light lit up, the sword energy had torn the ambitious team, destroyed the armored core, killed Gu Qianchuan in a second, and swallowed the murderous weapon setting Sunday. During the whole process, all the superpowers in the dark world had the most accurate test. Fast. Incredibly fast. From the appearance of the sword light to the death of Gu Qianchuan, it was more than 100 kilometers away. The whole process took 0.7 seconds. What did that mean? 0.7 seconds. No one could spread their sword energy to a distance of more than 100 kilometers in such a short time. The speed far beyond the speed of sound, the unparalleled destructive power, and the almost mythical flying distance all proved one thing. That sword was not Li Tianlan's sword. It was a murderous weapon. It was an unimaginably great power produced by the combination of many murderous weapons. The most terrifying thing was that with the continuous integration of the murderous weapons, the firepower of the murderous weapons seemed to be no longer pouring out at one time. With sufficient energy, Xian Yuanfeng had the conditions to use it many times. With Xian Yuanfeng's sword in hand, Li Tianlan in this state was even close to Wang Tianzong in Eastern Europe. He was truly invincible in the world. Kunlun City could not afford to offend such Li Tianlan. To be exact, they could not afford to offend him now. Xian Yuanfeng. The only thing they could do was to wait and retreat. The prince group was in a panic. The final battle in Beihai was about to begin. The battle was imminent. Kunlun City and even the entire dark world were looking forward to the day when Xian Yuanfeng ran out of energy. Now Li Tianlan might still be terrible without the murderous weapon, but he was definitely not invincible. Gu Xingyun's facial muscles twitched, and he only felt a stuffiness in his heart. Murderous weapon. Murderous weapon again. From the rise of Kunlun City to the present, it had always been stuck in a bottleneck because of the murderous weapon. During the period when the Li family fell, the Wang family of Beihai had Wang Tianzong. With the human emperor in his hand, no one in the dark world could fight against Wang Tianzong. Gu Xingyun managed to get the setting sun for Kunlun City at the cost of serious injury, but from beginning to end, he did not even have a chance to fire. Once again, it was swallowed and integrated by Li Tianlan's Xian Yuanfeng. Now, in the face of Emperor Dong's palace that was changing every day, he also did not dare to act rashly because of a murderous weapon. What was Li Tianlan without the murderous weapon? What was he? This question was actually not important. The important thing was that Li Tianlan now had a murderous weapon, and it was the strongest murderous weapon in the dark world. Gu Xingyun rubbed his temples and was about to speak. The fax machine in the study suddenly made a harsh sound. Lu Qing had sent all the complete information and photos over. This time, Gu Fengbo looked at the time and said, "Lu Qing has come out of the hidden dragon sea." He took all the information and handed it to Gu Xingyun. "It's all here." Gu Xingyun nodded, took it, and looked at it carefully. The first page of the confession was full of content that seemed to be true, but was actually absurd. The second page was probably the same. Gu Xingyun casually threw the first 2 pages aside, and turned to the third page. He raised his eyebrows and then frowned tightly. Then the 4th page. The study suddenly became extremely quiet. Gu Xingyun's face began to become more and more gloomy, and even a little frightened. His palm holding the information was trembling slightly. Lu Qing thought that the most important confession he had uploaded at the beginning was completely wrong. Those absurd conversations seemed to be important, but in fact they were meaningless. But the things that Lu Qing did not send at the beginning were the real fatal things. These included the arrangement of the Burning Legion in Tiannan after accepting the invitation of Kunlun City, the way to enter Tiannan, the channels used, the approximate number of people, and the exchange of interests, and the retreat channel of the Burning Legion after the raid on Yuzhou that day. Gu Xingyun's breathing became more and more rapid. These couldn't be things that Black Hawk could access. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that everything in the confession was true. This was obviously not the intelligence handled by Black Hawk. Why did he know? Gu Xingyun gasped, and suddenly threw the information in his hand into the air. Gu Fengbo was startled. When he was about to say something, the red confidential phone in the study suddenly rang. Gu Xingyun's body shook, and his face was a little pale. He moved over little by little and answered the phone. Xingyun, it's me. On the other end of the phone, Qi Baitsong's low voice sounded. Gu Xingyun took a deep breath and answered. Do you know about Black Hawk? Qi Baitsong asked. I just received the information and I'm still reading it. Gu Xingyun said. Black Hawk has now been handed over to Yuzhou Special Operations Bureau. Do you know about this? Qi Baitsong's voice was slow and hoarse. I know. Gu Xingyun nodded. Yuzhou Special Operations Bureau was his territory. After Drifting Cloud resigned, all the people from the director to the deputy director were his people. Qi Baitsong answered. He was silent for a long time, and then whispered, Black Hawk is dead. He died less than half an hour after entering the Special Operations Bureau. Gu Xingyun answered. Then he suddenly widened his eyes and his face changed dramatically. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.